The story begins in the dark shadows of the foliage outside a quiet kingdom. This is the small kingdom of Arma, a place tucked away behind massive mountain ranges. While it looks peaceful, a new and dangerous problem has just emerged. At the center of it all is the princess, the daughter of the first queen and the only survivor of a bloody rebellion. In the castle courtyard, life seems to move on as usual for the staff. Two maids nervously whisper to a newcomer about the way to the princess's isolated palace. This newcomer is Penny, who puts on a bright and cheerful smile to put them at ease. As she walks away, the other maids watch her, wishing her the best of luck. The moment she's out of sight, Penny's friendly mask slips instantly. She knows exactly what kind of reputation the princess has and isn't buying the luck talk. Rumors say the princess was driven insane by the rebellion that took her mother's life. They call her the Princess of Death, a woman who strikes down anyone who dares to speak to her. Penny arrives at the princess's neglected, vine-covered palace, ready to start her new role. Before entering, she stands before a window and practices her most convincing fake smile. She thinks to herself that everyone in this crumbling kingdom is just motivated by money. After a quick adjustment to her hair, she prepares to make her move. She envisions the princess as a tragic figure, isolated and surrounded by flowers. Penny stands ready, her expression becoming a blank slate. Her eyes sharpen with a hidden determination as she prepares to enter. She begins her ascent up the grand, lonely staircase of the palace. Deep in her mind, she sees a glowing keepsake ring with a brilliant blue stone. A vision flashes of two women in a dark room, passing this very ring between them during the chaos. One hand firmly slides the ring onto another's finger, sealing a secret pact. Back in the present, the princess wakes up with a sharp gasp, haunted by nightmares. Sunlight streams through her window, but the room feels cold and empty. She immediately wiggles her fingers, checking for something that isn't there. She stares at her bare hands, realizing her precious memento is still missing. Sighing, she finally forces herself out of bed. She steps onto a floor littered with discarded dresses and fabrics. The entire room is a chaotic mess, reflecting her troubled state of mind. Suddenly, a knock at the door announces Penny's arrival. Penny bursts into the room with an unnaturally cheerful greeting. She's incredibly confident in her acting skills and thinks her performance is perfect. However, she's momentarily stunned by the princess's ethereal beauty in the morning light. A falling leaf slaps her right in the face, quickly snapping her back to reality. Penny introduces herself and offers her services, ignoring the messy surroundings. The princess turns around, looking surprised to see such an energetic maid. Penny keeps up the act, asking the princess to just call her Penny. She gets to work immediately, preparing a fresh pot of tea. The princess is impressed by the aroma and takes a cautious sip. As she drinks, Penny watches her like a hawk. Penny starts to think the rumors were exaggerated and that this job might be a cakewalk. The princess sits gracefully, appearing completely normal despite her dark reputation. Penny leans in, trying to get a better read on her new target. Suddenly, Penny freezes in shock at what she hears next. The princess gives her a warm, gentle smile. She then casually mentions that Penny has a very funny look on her face. Penny is absolutely mortified, her pride as a professional taking a massive hit. She can't believe she's being called out for her expressions. Trying to pivot, Penny asks the princess a direct question. The princess invites her to sit down and speak her mind. The princess scoffs at first, but then breaks out into a fit of laughter. She seems to genuinely enjoy Penny's blunt and unusual behavior. Penny quickly realizes she made a mistake by actually sitting down and breaking protocol. She thinks back to her intense, abbreviated maid training and regrets her lack of polish. She feels like a total amateur compared to lifelong servants. The princess leans on the table, clearly finding Penny's internal struggle entertaining. She watches Penny with a playful, almost predatory glint in her eyes. Penny realizes she's being toyed with and starts to get annoyed. Penny tries to reset her professional mask and start over. The princess suddenly points out that Penny's hair is actually green, not blonde as it first appeared. Penny gives her a deadpan stare, her secret already being picked apart. She explains that she's a wanderer with no real home to speak of. Penny then turns the tables, asking the princess about the rumors surrounding her. The princess smiles charmingly, looking more like a regular girl than a princess of death. She admits she was so excited for a new companion that she spent all night trying on clothes. Penny isn't moved and tells her that excitement is no excuse for a messy room. The princess just smiles and insists she's telling the truth. Penny senses there is much more to this woman than meets the eye. The princess stands up, her demeanor shifting back to something more regal. She sets her teacup down with a firm clink. She tells Penny that she truly enjoyed their little chat. She expresses a hope that they will be working together for a long time. Penny forces another bright smile and thanks her, leaning into her energetic persona. The princess closes her eyes, looking satisfied with the interaction. Then she points to the mess and tells Penny it's finally time to get to work. Penny finds herself burdened with a literal mountain of laundry, while the princess relaxes. She begins the grueling task of tidying up the massive bedroom. As she cleans, Penny realizes the princess is far more cunning than the rumor suggested. She stops for a moment, gripping the bedsheets as she refocuses. Penny reminds herself that she isn't here to be a maid. She's on a mission for her master, the second queen. This is meant to be her final job before she earns her freedom. Across the room, the princess stares out with a cold, piercing gaze. Penny's orders are clear. Find the king's ring, eliminate the princess, and leave this life behind forever. Flashback to 1 year ago. Penny is seen in the woods looking over her shoulder, while on a secret mission. She is scolded by her companion for wandering off, and potentially being spotted by the palace guards. The companion reminds her that as servants of Queen Nyla, They must maintain the highest level of honor and discretion. A specialized sword represents the queen's secret personal army, known as the queen's children. The companion reveals that out of that entire elite order, they are the only 2 members left. Penny mocks the overly serious attitude regarding their duty as the queen's shield. She confidently claims her physical abilities are unmatched, and that no one in the empty palace could possibly catch her. Penny leaves her companion behind and disappears into the darkness of the night. She stands alone on a stone overlook, gazing at the silent palace grounds under a crescent moon. Penny grumbles about her companion's strict nature while navigating through the dense forest foliage. She complains that the palace garden has become a messy jungle due to neglect. Suddenly, she stops in her tracks as something catches her eye through the trees. She discovers a beautifully lit gazebo glowing in the middle of the dark woods. Penny is excited to find such a peaceful spot to hide and rest. Her celebration is short-lived when she hears a sudden sound coming from nearby. A woman with long pink hair appears on a balcony, staring out into the night. This is the princess, looking elegant and composed under the soft moonlight. The forest remains quiet around them, filled only with the sound of insects. Penny hides in the shadows, breathing a sigh of relief that she wasn't discovered. She briefly pities the princess for her lonely lifestyle, but quickly decides it isn't her concern. Time passes until Penny receives a new written mission to retrieve the king's ring from Princess Cher. She discusses the vague nature of the mission with her companion back in their quarters. Penny asks if the order to retrieve the item implies that the target must be eliminated. Her companion tells her that such a decision is entirely up to her. The king's ring is a priceless artifact that serves as a symbol of national power. Historically, the ring should have passed to Nyla after the rebellion that ended the previous reign. Instead, the ring remained in the possession of the young princess. Penny realizes identifying the ring will be difficult, since the only people who knew what it looked like are dead. She understands the queen expects her to go undercover as a lady-in-waiting to find the treasure. Penny imagines a silly scenario where the princess simply hands over the ring upon request. She grips the mission scroll tightly, focusing on the task at hand. Penny stares at the paper, her expression hardening as she accepts the assignment. A vision of Princess Cher looking fragile and sad briefly flashes through her mind. Penny snaps out of it, reminding herself that the target is still royalty and a potential threat. She motivates herself by planning to steal the princess's jewels to fund a permanent escape. This mission will be her last act before she runs away to find true freedom. Penny looks out a window, dreaming of the day she will finally be free from her duties. The narrative shifts back to the present day as the flashback ends. Penny is startled out of her thoughts when someone calls her name. The princess leans in close, checking to see if her maid is actually paying attention. Penny quickly snaps back to her cheerful persona as they walk through the garden. The princess accepts the excuse, though she still seems somewhat suspicious. Penny watches her closely, noting the massive difference between the girl she saw a year ago and the woman now. She feels a sense of disgust at how demanding and wicked the princess has supposedly become. The princess begins to explain the identity of a boy named Belle. Penny learns that Belle is the princess's half-brother and Queen Nyla's second son. Penny is visibly surprised by this revelation regarding the royal family tree. The princess correctly guesses that Penny grew up without any siblings of her own. Penny lies and describes her childhood in a small village where the community lived like one big family. The princess looks away, expressing a hint of jealousy at the thought of having a large family. Penny continues the act, talking about a group of stubborn kids she supposedly grew up with. The princess asks Penny what her real motivation was for coming to work at the palace. Penny glances to the side, carefully maintaining her cover story. She looks up at the palace windows, noting that Queen Nyla's study is directly above them. Penny remains focused on her surroundings, staying alert while playing her role. She realizes they are sitting in a spot where they could easily be observed from the queen's room. Penny tells the princess that she only took the job because the pay was good. She claims her dream is to save up enough money to go on a long trip and see the world. The princess looks down, realizing that Penny will likely leave her service soon. Penny notices the sudden shift in the princess's mood and expression. The princess gazes off with a melancholic look, lost in her own thoughts. She quietly mentions that she expects to be leaving the palace soon as well. Penny recalls the violent rebellion that was sparked by the death of the previous queen. She remembers the close and affectionate bond the princess once shared with her mother. Penny feels a moment of awkwardness for bringing up a topic that clearly caused distress. Penny tries to lighten the mood by suggesting the princess should just come along on her trip. The princess smiles softly, seemingly cheered up by the unexpected offer. She reaches out her hand toward Penny in a formal gesture. Penny decides to play along with the princess's whims to maintain her favor. The princess stands up, looking elegant as the sunlight filters through the trees. The princess asks Penny to escort her back, acting every bit the refined royal. Penny is a bit surprised by the request, but prepares to assist her. The princess looks back with a calm, mysterious expression. Penny takes her hand, fulfilling her duty as a loyal lady-in-waiting for the time being. A sudden breeze rustles the leaves as the two walk together. Meanwhile, someone is watching the interaction from behind the library curtains. Queen Nyla gazes down from her study, her expression unreadable as she observes Penny and the princess. Penny knocks firmly on the bedroom door, calling out to see if the princess princess is awake. Inside, Princess Cher remains fast asleep, completely undisturbed by the noise. Penny steps inside and briskly pulls the heavy curtains aside to let the sunlight pour in. The maid then yanks the covers off the princess, announcing that it is already noon. Cher sits up with a groggy expression, complaining about the lack of a gentle wake-up call. Bright light fills the room as the princess finally begins her day long after sunrise. Cher spends her afternoon lounging on the terrace, staring out at the palace grounds. She eventually moves to a small table to pick at her brunch. Watching this repetitive routine, Penny looks completely drained by the prince's lack of ambition. Later, Penny taps her fingers against the wall, her patience wearing thin. She casts a sharp glance back, her mind constantly working on her secret objective. Meanwhile, the princess remains disinterested, slowly stirring her tea. Penny slumps into a chair, letting out a heavy sigh of exhaustion. She realizes with frustration that the king's ring is nowhere to be found. Her thoughts race through the limited hiding spots left in the royal chambers. A close-up shows her eyes narrowing as she calculates her next move. Cher eventually rests her head on the maid's shoulder, seeking a moment of quiet comfort. The princess looks peaceful as she drifts off into a light nap. Penny carefully adjusts the princess's garments to ensure she stays warm. She maintains a clinical and focused expression while performing her duties. Penny places a steadying hand on the princess's shoulder to keep her from slipping. She wraps a protective shawl around the sleeping royal. The two sit together on the sofa in the fading light of the afternoon. Suddenly, Penny's senses tingle as she hears a faint noise in the hallway. Cher wakes up and tells Penny she is fine, dismissing her concern. The princess then tells the maid she is free to go for the rest of the day, leaving Penny stunned. Standing outside, Penny wonders if she did something to annoy the princess into dismissing her so early. She quickly decides to use this unexpected freedom to conduct a more thorough search. Penny approaches the queen's study, carefully testing the door handle. Finding it unlocked, she slips inside, eager to uncover any hidden records. Birds chirp outside as she begins her unauthorized investigation. She begins flipping through the various volumes lining the massive bookshelves. Penny sits on the floor, surrounded by history books detailing the royal lineage. She shuts a book with a sigh, finding only common knowledge inside. Frustrated, she shoves a book back into its place, annoyed by the lack of progress. Her hand brushes against a row of identical spines until one catches her eye. She notices a subtle difference in the labeling of a specific volume. A close-up reveals the name Abel embossed on the book's spine. Penny carefully slides the book out, hoping for a breakthrough. The sound of footsteps approaching the door causes Penny to freeze in terror. She realizes with a start that Queen Nyla is returning to the study. The queen enters the room, venting her frustration about the political pressure surrounding the king's ring. Her assistant, Lu, follows closely behind and shuts the door. Lu suggests opening a window to help the queen manage her rising temper. Nyla walks toward the light, briefly thanking her loyal attendant. Hidden behind the thick curtains, Penny holds her breath as the queen stands just inches away. She grips the fabric tightly, her heart racing as she tries to remain invisible. Lu reassures the queen that the mission to recover the keepsakes is still on track. Lu's hand reaches out and brushes against the very curtain Penny is hiding behind. The assistant cold-bloodedly states that she will handle the princess herself if Penny fails. Queen Nyla listens with a sharp, calculating gaze. She tells Lu that such extreme measures are not required at this moment. Nyla then dismisses her staff, wanting to be alone in her thoughts. Penny waits in the shadows, her eyes wide with the realization of the danger she's in. She scans the room through the gap in the curtains to ensure everyone has left. Suddenly, a hand reaches out and pulls the curtain back from the outside. Penny's face pales as she finds herself staring directly at the person she was hiding from. Queen Nyla stands there with a knowing smirk, revealing she was aware of the intruder the entire time. Penny is visibly shaken by the confrontation. She stumbles backward, nearly losing her balance in her haste to retreat. Penny falls back onto a nearby bench, her mind racing for an excuse. The queen looms over her, demanding an update on the mission. Nyla warns her that while befriending the target is useful, she must not lose sight of her objective. The queen places a gloved hand on Penny's head in a show of dominance. Nyla lifts Penny's chin, forcing the assassin to look her in the eye. She demands a clear answer, reminding Penny of the consequences of failure. Penny looks up with a hardened expression, hiding her internal turmoil. Under the cover of night, a figure moves swiftly through the palace corridors. Penny is seen observing the princess's chambers from a high window. She moves with purpose, driven by the queen's recent threats. Penny brushes her hair back, irritated by how easily Nyla can manipulate her. The queen's chilling reminder about her duty echoes in her mind. Penny steps firmly onto the carpeted floor, determined to finish what she started. She navigates the silent, dark hallways of the inner palace. She reaches the ornate doors of the princess's private quarters. Princess Cher is shown sleeping deeply, unaware of the intruder in her room. Penny looks down at her target, her expression cold and detached. She reaches out toward the sleeping princess, preparing to strike. The moonlight illuminates the balcony outside as the tension peaks. The entire room is deathly still as the assassin stands over the bed. Penny's hands hover over the target, but she finds herself hesitating. Instead of completing her task, she gently moves a strand of hair from Cher's face. Penny leans in, her resolve wavering as she looks at the woman she was sent to eliminate. Cher's eyes suddenly snap open, catching Penny in the act. Penny is frozen in shock as the target wakes up at the worst possible moment. The princess quickly reaches out and grabs Penny's wrist. Cher pulls the maid down toward her with unexpected force. The struggle causes both women to tumble off the edge of the bed. They land hard on the floor, the impact leaving them both winded. Penny immediately checks on the princess to see if she was hurt in the fall. Cher points out that Penny's own hands are bleeding from the rough landing. Penny attempts to pull away, but the princess holds her firmly by her uniform. Cher looks her directly in the eye and asks why she hasn't finished the mission yet. Cher stares down Penny, questioning why she hasn't been eliminated yet. Penny is stunned and unable to answer as she realizes her target is fully aware of the situation. The princess grows frustrated, demanding to know the reason for the hesitation. She challenges the assassin to finish the job right then and there. A heavy silence fills the room as the two remain locked in a tense confrontation on the floor. Penny's hand trembles against the floor as she struggles with her internal conflict. Sweat beads down her face while her heart races with indecision. She sits frozen, reflecting on the weight of the moment. Cher waits for an answer, her expression unreadable in the dim light. A close-up shows the princess's intense gaze fixed on her supposed attacker. Penny finally admits to herself that she never truly intended to harm the royal. The scene shifts as the doors to a grand hall are thrown open. The perspective moves through the empty, quiet corridors of the estate. Moonlight filters through the tall windows of the silent palace. A flashback begins in a rugged, mountainous region where Penny spent her youth. A 15-year-old Penny looks back, appearing much more innocent than her current self. Her companions call her over to begin their daily morning training session. They trudge through the grass, discussing the lack of breakfast for the day. The children are gathered in a dirt courtyard filled with wooden training posts. Thick foliage hides the harsh reality of the village's true purpose. Young Penny clenches her fist, determined to escape her current life someday. The sound of training echoes through an arched stone doorway. A wooden practice weapon is struck firmly into the ground during a drill. Penny gasps for air, pushing herself through the grueling physical demands. The terrain shifts to a dark, muddy area as the flashback continues. Dust and debris cloud the air, signaling the destruction of the border village. Survivors are gathered and inspected by stern-faced recruiters. A weary Penny rests in the back of a traveling wooden cart. The cart hits a bump, jolting her awake from her uncomfortable slumber. She groans while adjusting to the constant movement of the transport. Darkness envelops the scene as she is taken to a more secure location. Penny wakes up restrained on the floor of a cold, stone room. Lou stands over her, observing the new recruit with a cold, analytical look. Beside Lou stands a mysterious, elegant woman shrouded in shadows and roses. Queen Nyla reveals herself, studying Penny with a calculating gaze. Penny gulps, realizing she is face-to-face with the powerful monarch of the Arma Kingdom. The queen turns to leave as the young recruit remains guarded. Nyla's profile shows her sharp features and cold determination. A heavy wooden door slams shut, locking Penny inside her new reality. Time passes as Penny continues her training, looking battered and worn down. She sits before the queen, receiving instructions for her various missions. Despite the hardship, a flicker of defiance remains in her eyes. She secretly hoards a small chest of coins and keepsakes for a future escape. Penny gazes out of a high window, dreaming of a life beyond the palace walls. She examines a small pink stone, using it as a reminder of her goal to reach the ocean. The sound of footsteps in the grass marks a shift in her routine. Princess Cher is seen from a distance, surrounded by roses on her balcony. Penny watches the royal from a hidden position within the garden. The prince's graceful profile is highlighted against the soft floral backdrop. Penny observes from beneath the shade of a large tree, full of questions. She looks up at the sky, contemplating her role as the one meant to end the royal's life. Back in the present, Penny sprints through the garden, out of breath. She collapses against a stone pillar, gasping for air after her encounter. Looking up at the night sky, Penny realizes her own desires have complicated her mission. A quiet bedroom sits empty under the moonlight. Princess Cher lies on the floor, lost in thought after the recent confrontation. The palace hallway remains still as the night progresses. Cher wonders why the assassin chose to flee instead of finishing the job. Picking herself up, the princess decides she cannot stay idle. She makes her way toward the large glass doors leading outside. Barefoot and determined, she steps out into the cool air. Cher stands on the balcony, looking out at her kingdom. The garden below is bathed in blue shadows, hiding a quiet gazebo. Memories of her family's complicated past begin to resurface. A dusty portrait shows the royal family in more stable times. Queen Nyla was once a distant relative forced into a strategic marriage. A young Cher looks up with wide eyes during an early meeting with her aunt. Nyla's expression is unreadable as she examines the young princess. She offers a simple, reassuring gesture by placing a hand on Cher's head. Nyla puts on a warm smile, masking her true ambitions. She asks for permission to call the princess by her nickname. Young Cher happily agrees, feeling a sense of belonging. Childhood days were filled with lessons and companionship. She spent her time playing in the gardens with those close to her. The first queen appears in a memory, standing tall and regal. Her face is calm, showing no sign of the tragedy to come. A somber funeral marks the beginning of the end for the royal house. The palace interior shifts into a scene of sudden, chaotic change. Cher enters the throne room to find her mother standing over a fallen figure. The queen turns around, her face marked by a grim struggle. She points toward a specific royal keepsake lying on the ground. Horror washes over Cher as she realizes the gravity of the situation. Her mother stands amidst the chaos, her regal attire stained. With a haunting expression, The queen claims the marks on her face are not her own. She steps forward, forcing Cher to retreat in shock. The queen takes hold of Cher, her grip firm and desperate. She reveals that the royal charm contains a secret, dangerous substance. Cher loses her footing, slipping on the floor as the queen pulls her closer. The queen demands that Cher take the charm and use it to escape her fate. The young princess can hardly process the terrifying request. Tears fill her eyes as her world collapses around her. The queen slides the dangerous keepsake onto Cher's finger. Overcome by her own actions, the queen begins to succumb to her condition. The hallway stands empty, echoing with the silence of the aftermath. Cher catches her mother as she falls, holding her one last time. The weight of the crown and its secrets now rests solely on her. She sits alone in the vast hall, surrounded by the remnants of her family. A bright light signals the arrival of others into the room. Nyla enters with her guard, ready to seize the opportunity. From her place on the floor, Cher looks up at the woman who will become her new handler. The realization of her new, isolated reality sets in. Nyla stands with her sword, asserting her authority over the palace. Cher knows that her life as she knew it has reached its final chapter. The grand room is flooded with a harsh, unforgiving light. She remembers a promise made to a friend about a future journey. A stone monument stands in the rain, marking another tragic loss. The princess looks on with a hollow expression, mourning what was taken. Back in the present, she leans against the window, gathering her resolve. She vows to leave the kingdom and destroy the dangerous keepsake forever. Cher thinks back to the time Penny spent waiting in the garden. The first light of dawn begins to break across the horizon. The village hallway is quiet as the sun rises. Penny is startled awake in her room by a sudden knocking. She cautiously opens the door to see who would visit at such an hour. Her eyes widen in complete disbelief at the person standing before her. Princess Cher stands there with a soft smile, ready to change both their fates. A door creaks open as a heavy boot steps into the room. Penny looks startled as she realizes the princess has entered her private quarters. Cher glances back at her with a serious and unreadable expression. The princess observes the messy state of the room, noting it is usually much more tidy. She questions if Penny was planning on running away, causing the servant to break into a cold sweat. Penny's hand clenches the door handle tightly as she denies any intention of fleeing. The two stand opposite each other in the middle of the dimly lit room. Cher suggests they move their conversation somewhere else under the morning sky. The pair walks together through the dense forest as the sun begins to rise. Cher leads the way with her back turned, her long hair flowing behind her. Penny notes that the princess woke up unusually early today. Cher comes to a sudden halt on the grassy path, signaling the end of their walk. They stand among the trees while the forest is still shrouded in the soft morning light. Penny asks if there was something specific Her Highness wanted to discuss so urgently. Looking out over the horizon, Cher confirms that she intends to be straightforward. She turns her head slightly, preparing to reveal her true motives. Cher describes the treacherous foggy forest, a maze-like place where only exiles and mercenaries gather. Standing on the path, the princess reveals she has a dangerous job for Penny to complete. She offers to pay with all her jewels if Penny can guide her through the forest to the border. Penny acts confused, claiming she is nothing more than a simple lady-in-waiting. She looks away, pretending not to understand the gravity of the princess's request. Cher reaches into her clothing to pull out a hidden object she's been keeping close. She reveals a royal charm, knowing Penny has been searching for this specific keepsake all along. Penny is stunned into silence, her posture stiffening as her secret is exposed. Her hand drops to her side as she wonders how her true mission was discovered. Cher explains that she became suspicious after being suddenly assigned a new servant right after the rebellion. Penny listens intently, realizing her cover has been completely blown by the princess's intuition. The princess holds up the royal charm, explaining she knew the usurper would send someone to retrieve it. She admits she expected an assassin would eventually come to take her life. Cher looks Penny directly in the eye, confirming she knows exactly who the woman really is. Penny shifts her stance, her expression darkening now that the truth is out in the open. She suddenly lunges forward, pinning the princess against a tree in one swift motion. Penny grips the princess's chin, demanding to know what she would do if she were taken out right here. The servant stares back with cold, determined eyes, showing no fear. Cher reaches out and grabs Penny's collar, remaining completely unfazed by the physical threat. She reminds Penny that despite having the opportunities to finish the job, she hasn't done it yet. The princess leans in close, ordering Penny to create a replica of the charm and lead her to safety. She declares her firm intent to leave the kingdom and get rid of the dangerous object forever. Cher grips Penny's hand, emphasizing the urgency and finality of her demand. She warns that the kingdom is destined to crumble regardless of who holds the royal charm. Penny looks down, processing the princess's grim and cynical outlook on their future. A gust of wind blows through the trees as the tension between the two women lingers. Cher admits she has no good memories left in this place and simply wants to disappear. Standing among the flowers, she confesses she cannot navigate the treacherous foggy forest alone. Penny clenches her fist around a piece of cloth, finally making a difficult decision. She agrees to the deal, asking if she simply needs to forge a fake version of the charm. Cher looks down with a faint, sad expression, confirming the start of their secret plan. They sit together at a stone table while Penny begins to sketch the intricate design of the royal charm. Cher watches the drawing closely, noting that the object has a specific joint that requires careful handling. She explains that the inner part is laced with a deadly toxin, making even a slight touch fatal. The princess remains lost in thought as she explains the dark and tragic purpose of the heirloom. Penny reaches out to grab Cher's hands, stopping her from handling the toxic item so carelessly. She complains that she can't see the fine details properly if Cher holds it in that position. Penny laughs nervously, asking if she can just borrow the charm for a day to finish the replica. Cher's sudden shift to a serious tone startles the servant back into a state of alertness. With a forced smile, the princess reminds Penny that she can't fully trust someone who once tried to kill her. Below them, two birds sit on a branch as Penny grumbles about having to make an exact copy. Cher turns away, maintaining her cold and distant demeanor as the sun continues to rise. Penny rests her chin on her hand, observing the princess with a knowing and curious look. She notes that despite the chaos, the princess's stubborn and difficult nature hasn't changed at all. Penny explains that producing a high-quality replica will take at least 3 days of work. She asks if the princess would like to get some rest while she goes to place the order. Cher gives Penny a friendly pat on the shoulder, telling her not to return until the job is done. The princess smiles through the closing door, promising to see her partner in crime in 3 days. Penny stands alone outside the large, closed doors of the royal chamber. She looks completely baffled, realizing the princess is still as unpredictable as the day they met. Penny opens the door to her quarters and steps inside after a long day. She closes the door behind her, finally finding a moment of privacy. Penny looks deeply concerned as she processes the deal she just made with the princess. She holds the mission's target in her hand, realizing that the 3-day deadline actually gives her time to settle her thoughts. She walks across the wooden floor, the weight of her dual life as an assassin and a maid pressing on her. Exhausted, she collapses onto her bed to rest for a moment. She stares at the ceiling, thinking about the princess's plan to flee the kingdom and discard the keepsake. Her gaze wanders as she considers the danger the princess will be in once she is truly alone. Turning over, Penny wonders what will become of the royal woman after their deal is complete. The small wooden container holding the sensitive mission objective sits nearby on the sheets. Penny's eyes remain wide open as she grapples with the morality of her mission. The scene shifts to the bustling town of Arma, where the sun shines over the colorful rooftops. A lone figure in a cloak makes their way through the city toward the guild office. Inside the Arma Kingdom Guild office, a clerk is busy working behind a massive wooden desk. Penny approaches the counter in her disguise, knocking to get the man's attention. She presents a request to purchase a replica of a specific accessory, but with a different gemstone. The guild official pulls out a magnifying glass to carefully inspect the reference she provided. Penny is surprised when he mentions that they have recently started producing these items themselves. He explains that their business is expanding because many other shops in town are forced to close. Looking out at the quiet streets, Penny realizes how much the ongoing war has drained the city's life. The official notices her reaction and asks if she is new to the city of Arma. She admits she arrived near the end of the war, leading him to assume she is just another mercenary. He gives her some unsolicited advice about being selective with the tasks she takes on for high-ranking clients. The man slams the desk and points a finger, warning her that the demand for mercenaries is at an all-time high. He rambles on about how the wealthy are hiring protection to tie up loose ends before fleeing. Penny gives a polite smile, finding the man to be quite the chatterbox. She slides a gold coin across the table as a thank you for the valuable information. The official waves her off, insisting that they are all just trying to help each other out during these tough times. He leans in closer to share a final piece of sensitive gossip with the disguised assassin. Penny's expression turns serious as she hears rumors that the queen is heading to the border for final negotiations. He suggests she look into the palace's recent hiring spree if she's looking for more mercenary work. They finalize the order for the replica, and he suggests she grab a meal at a nearby restaurant before leaving. Penny's stomach lets out a loud growl, signaling that it's definitely time to eat. She pays for her food at a local tavern, where the staff wishes her an enjoyable meal. Sitting at a long, empty table, Penny feels a bit disappointed by the simple spread in front of her. She stirs her bowl of soup, her mind stuck on the news about the Queen's movements. She wonders why such critical information wasn't shared with her earlier. As the soup drips from her spoon, she realizes that if negotiations fail, the entire kingdom will fall. Penny looks up sharply as she overhears the cynical conversations of the men sitting nearby. They argue about their hometown being nothing more than a puppet for a larger empire. The patrons discuss the Queen's inability to hold a coronation and the empire's plan to consume the kingdom. They laugh about how pointlessly they are struggling when the end is so near. One man predicts that even those living in the palace won't survive the coming disaster. They mock the idea of anyone successfully escaping through the treacherous foggy forest. Penny looks down, coldly noting that a war usually ends once the leader is eliminated. She lets out a heavy sigh, feeling the weight of the dark predictions around her. Brushing off the worry, she decides it's better to just focus on finishing her meal. A view of the tavern's kitchen makes her think of her responsibilities back at the palace. She wonders who is currently taking care of the princess's meals while she is away. Penny realizes that the princess might not even be awake yet to look after herself. She remembers the princess's firm command to stay away until the replica replica is finished. Despite the orders, she decides she must return to the palace immediately. She tells herself she's only stopping by to ensure the princess has something to eat. Having changed back into her maid attire, Penny bursts into the royal bedroom with a package of food. She is greeted by a heavy silence as she stands in the center of the large, empty room. Noticing the bed is empty, she realizes the princess is nowhere to be found. Penny calls out for her highness, her eyes drawn to the bright light flooding in from the balcony. She looks toward the outdoor area with a mix of curiosity and concern. She spots the princess sitting alone at a table overlooking the palace grounds. Exhausted from her own secret efforts, the princess has fallen fast asleep over a pile of books. A close-up reveals a golden eye opening wide as memories of the past begin to resurface. In a dreamlike sequence, a woman in red sits in a sun-drenched field while cradling a young man. The woman looks down at the boy with a somber, unreadable expression as blue petals drift around them. She turns her attention toward another woman sitting nearby in a yellow gown. The woman in the yellow dress sits on the grass, trembling as she claims she knew nothing of the situation. A hand reaches out to gently brush against her face in a comforting gesture. She looks up with a startled expression, her eyes wide with shock. The young man offers a bright, reassuring smile amidst the flowers. She remains frozen, wondering if everything will truly be all right. The vision fades into a clear blue sky framed by lush green leaves. Cher blinks her eyes open, realizing that the haunting memory was only a dream. Her vision is hazy as she spots a figure standing over her. Penny reaches down to pick a stray petal off the sleeping prince's face. Noticing Cher is awake, Penny stands by the table and asks if she was the one who woke her up. Penny explains that the wind was blowing petals onto her, but Cher reminds her that she wasn't supposed to visit for 3 days. Cher rubs her head, feeling the lingering weight of her dream. Penny stands awkwardly, unsure of how to respond to the cold reception. She quickly bows and apologizes for the intrusion, trying to lighten the mood. To make amends, Penny pushes a wrapped meal across the table for the princess. She watches Cher with a soft smile, hoping the food will be accepted. Cher stares back at her, the tension in the room beginning to thaw. A close-up shows the freshly prepared sandwiches waiting to be eaten. Penny starts eating one of the sandwiches herself, making quick work of the meal. While Penny eats, Cher opens a suitcase she had been keeping nearby. Penny is surprised, realizing she has never seen this particular suitcase. During her cleaning shifts, Cher looks down at the contents with a focused, serious expression. She reaches into the suitcase to pull something out. Cher reveals it's just a storybook about a witch living in the misty woods. Penny takes the book, amused that the princess has been reading children's stories this whole time. She questions why Cher would choose to read out here in the morning chill instead of her room. Penny imagines herself struggling to move the heavy table back inside the room. She realizes that if she can't even move a table, navigating the dangerous woods will be even harder. A hand flips through the pages of the book, ignoring the commentary. Penny continues to eat while contemplating the logistics of the misty woods. She considers the first path, which involves a steep and rocky hill behind the kingdom. Cher places the book back down on the table. Penny reaches for the wrapper to clean up her mess. She takes another large bite, focused entirely on finishing her breakfast. Cher rests her chin on her hand, watching the maid eat with a faint interest. Penny stops mid-chew as a piece of food begins to slip out of her sandwich. Cher warns her not to move, or the food will fall and ruin her clothes. The princess leans in closely to catch the falling food before it makes a mess. Cher looks down with a calm and steady gaze as she assists Penny. Penny is left stunned by the sudden proximity and help from the princess. Cher stands up and walks away, dismissing the moment as nothing important. Penny watches her go, her expression filled with confusion. Cher stands by the window, looking out at the palace grounds. Penny finds it strange that Cher wants to travel with someone who once tried to take her life. Cher remains silent, her back turned to the maid as the sunlight hits her gown. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, Cher asks if she ever mentioned her brother Belle. She runs her hand along the edge of the furniture as she speaks of her promise to leave the palace. Penny listens intently, though she looks away to hide her reaction. She clenches the fabric of her apron, feeling a wave of complicated emotions. Cher also grips her dress tightly, noting that Penny reminds her very much of her brother. Feeling the weight of the conversation, Penny decides it is time to leave. The two stand in silence for a moment in the grand, sunlit room. A vase of flowers sits on the table as petals begin to fall. Cher remains standing still as she hears the maid prepare to exit. Penny reaches for the door handle and quickly scurries out of the room. Left alone, Cher looks down with a somber expression. She leans against the door, wondering if she was too honest about her feelings. Penny walks away with a determined look after her conversation with the princess. She reaches for the heavy door handles to make her exit from the room. Once outside, she leans against the doors in frustration, annoyed that she was sent away so easily. Suddenly, the doors click and begin to open, catching her completely off guard. Cher steps out and surprises her, leading to a momentarily awkward encounter. Standing in the hallway, Cher looks at Penny with a puzzled expression and asks what she's been doing out there. Penny blushes and stammers, clearly embarrassed about being caught lingering. Cher mentions she was about to go find her and asks if Penny is heading somewhere. She then tells Penny to take off her apron, suggesting they have somewhere to go. Cher confirms they aren't going to the forest today as she adjusts her sun hat. They arrive at the massive palace library, which is filled with rows upon rows of books. Penny looks around in surprise, as it's her first time seeing the scale of the facility. She notices that the other visitors are dressed very formally, making her feel like she stands out. Walking through the crowd, Penny realizes the library is a popular spot for many citizens. Cher begins searching the shelves, explaining that the library has an extensive collection. She pulls out a book, intending to look for geography information to help create a map. Penny points out that mercenaries usually sell maps of the area, though Cher finds them unreliable. They start their research, planning to cross-reference multiple books to find consistent information. After a long session of searching, the two prepare to head out for the day. Cher gives a small smile and tells Penny they can return tomorrow to continue their work. Penny stands there with a blank stare, processing the day's events. Cher notices her silence and looks back with a gentle gaze. She tells Penny to take the rest of the day off and spend it however she likes. Holding her book, Cher encourages her to enjoy her free time. Sunlight fills the hallway as Cher walks away, leaving Penny behind. Penny stands alone in the aisle, looking down at her boots in thought. She watches as the princess disappears into the distance of the library. The vastness of the library highlights Penny's sudden isolation. She eventually slumps down onto the floor, sighing over how awkward the situation felt. Penny clenches her clothes, feeling a sense of inner turmoil. She recalls Cher's words about her resembling the late Prince Belle. Resting her head on her arms, she struggles with her feelings of being a mere substitute. She wonders if Cher's trust was only ever based on her resemblance to someone else. Penny tries to brush it off, reminding herself that she originally had a mission to eliminate the princess. She leans back against the shelves with a thud, feeling a strange sense of rejection. A close-up reveals her conflicted expression as she questions what she really wants from this relationship. With a groan, Penny finally pushes herself back up from the floor. She begins walking through the aisles, deciding she might as well find something to read for herself. Something on a nearby table catches her attention. She finds a sparkly, ornate book that stands out from the rest. Realizing it's a history book that is updated for every new ruler, she flips to the very end. She discovers that the princess's full name is Cherdian. Curious about the past, she continues to flip through the pages. She stops abruptly when she sees the name Belle von L'Arma in the records. The text reveals that Prince Abel passed away in the year 141 due to poisoning. Penny's expression turns grave as she realizes the weight of that history. The book further explains that Princess Cherdian also fell into a critical condition due to poison at the same time. Penny looks up from the pages, sensing that the official records might be hiding something. She then spots Cher nearby, who is suddenly suffering from a nosebleed. Penny is visibly shocked and alarmed by the sight. She dashes over to help, while Cher tries to dismiss it as simple exhaustion. Penny insists that the princess needs to go home and rest immediately. She hands over a cloth to help Cher clean up the mess. Cher looks down with a somber expression before finally agreeing to stop for the day. The scene transitions to a peaceful, sun-drenched field of white flowers. Cher sits in a gazebo while Penny scolds her for trying to handle her health issues alone. To help her relax, Penny begins braiding small white flowers into the princess's hair. She carefully weaves the delicate blooms into the long braid. Cher turns around and asks Penny if she is feeling okay now. Penny is taken aback by the question, her hands pausing in midair. She suddenly remembers she has a gift for the princess and springs up to go get it. Penny dashes off into the meadow, promising to bring back more flowers. Cher watches her run away, her expression unreadable. Penny starts picking flowers, wondering why the princess' gaze startled her so much. As she plucks a daisy, she realizes that Cher was actually the one worrying about her. She gathers a large bunch of white flowers to bring back to the gazebo. Holding the bouquet, she looks back toward the princess from across the field. Penny touches her neck, feeling a lingering sense of unease or realization. She looks back with a contemplative and slightly troubled expression. Cher remains in the gazebo, resting her head on her hand as the wind blows petals around her. A close-up shows Cher's eyes as she gazes out into the distance, lost in thought. Penny stands in the tall grass, observing the princess from a distance. She grips the bouquet of flowers tightly in her hand. Looking at the quiet scene, Penny wonders who the princess is really thinking about in that moment. A voice asks the princess who occupies her thoughts at this moment. Penny stares off into the distance, choosing to keep her internal reflections to herself. A vase of fresh daisies sits in the room, symbolizing a moment of quiet peace. The two spend their days buried in books at the library, focusing on the mysteries of the foggy forest. As the research continues, a pen rolls across the table while Penny stays focused on the texts. Penny notices the princess is nodding off over her work again. Realizing how exhausted the princess is, Penny gently urges her to return to her room for a nap before dinner. The princess wipes her eyes, finally agreeing that some rest is a good idea. They walk through the grand, silent hallways of the palace. Penny helps settle the princess into bed, making sure she is comfortable. Looking at the sleeping royal, Penny realizes that the princess must not be sleeping well at night. The princess quickly falls into a deep slumber under the covers. Penny draws the curtains to block out the light, noticing the toll the recent events have taken. Penny returns to her own sparse living quarters. Despite not having done much physical work, the mental strain leaves her completely drained as she collapses onto her bed. She lies there for a moment, staring blankly as she processes her conflicting emotions. On a nearby table sits a small chest and her spare uniform. Sunlight streams through the window as she reaches for a personal item. She lifts a ribbon adorned with a green gemstone, a small keepsake from her past. Holding the charm, she reflects on how her situation remains largely unchanged despite everything. The next day finds the pair back back in the vast library. Penny stares at her book with a blank expression, her mind clearly elsewhere. The princess remains focused, her face partially obscured by a veiled hat as she scribbles notes. Penny observes that the princess is no longer asking for help and is instead working entirely on her own. While browsing, Penny finds a book detailing the kingdom's major tourist attractions. The book describes the Chamber of Portraits, a place housing the likenesses of every royal generation. Intrigued by the idea of seeing the royal lineage, Penny flips through the pages. She becomes curious about whether she can find a specific face in that gallery. She steals a quick glance at the princess to see if she's being watched. The princess remains occupied with her own writing, seemingly indifferent to Penny's movements. Penny quietly stacks her books, deciding to investigate the chamber on her own. She quickly tiptoes out of the library and zooms toward the main building. In her absence, the princess continues her work in total silence. Penny navigates the palace grounds, heading toward the restricted area. She slips into the main building, which requires special clearance to enter. She finds herself in a long, sunlit corridor lined with heavy red curtains. Penny looks around the hallway, noting that it looks more like a simple passage than a grand chamber. She reaches the entrance of a much darker, more imposing section of the gallery. Penny steps onto the plush carpet, her heart racing as she enters the shadows. She moves through the dark corridor, where only thin slivers of light peek through the drapes. Peeking around a corner, she realizes the hallway is far longer than she anticipated. The atmosphere is heavy and eerie as she walks deeper into the darkness. She begins pulling back the curtains one by one to see what lies beneath. She soon realizes the curtains aren't covering windows, but hidden frames. The first portrait she uncovers is that of the first king of Arma. Looking down the line, she sees a vast array of curtain portraits stretching into the distance. She complains to herself that the place feels more like a funeral home than a gallery. Further down the hall, she spots a section that is much more brightly lit. She approaches the light, hoping to find what she's looking for. To her surprise, she sees another maid standing perfectly still in front of a portrait. The woman turns around, revealing herself to be Lu. Panicked, Penny tries to hide behind one of the thick red curtains. Lu calls out Penny's name with a stern, knowing tone. Penny stays frozen and sweating, hoping Lu didn't actually see her. Lu reaches out and pulls the curtain back, exposing Penny's hiding spot. Lu stares at her with a sharp, suspicious gaze. She demands to know why Penny is sneaking around and why she suddenly stopped talking. Lu asks point blank if Penny came here specifically to see Prince Belle's portrait. Penny tries to act tough, defensively asking why Lu would even think that. Lu simply reaches up to the frame behind them. As the curtain is lifted, Penny realizes with a shock that she was standing directly in front of likeness the entire time. Penny stares in shock at the portrait revealed before her. She can't believe her eyes as she processes the image. The painting depicts Prince Belle, a young man with blonde hair and a sharp uniform. A detailed look at the portrait reveals his striking, light-colored eyes. A hand reaches out to touch the ornate frame of the hidden artwork. Lu points out that Penny bears absolutely no resemblance to the late prince. They compare the prince's bright blonde hair to Penny's own features. Lu notes that the prince had double eyelids, further highlighting their differences. Penny gets irritated by Lu's blunt and unflattering observations. Lu insists she's only speaking the truth about their lack of a connection. Penny mentions there is someone else in the palace she actually looks like. She quickly realizes that comparing herself to the princess would be a dangerous move. Lu gives her a stern look and tells her to focus on her own tasks. Lu adjusts her collar while commenting on Penny's apparent fascination with others. The maid's expression turns cold as she delivers a silent warning. Lu steps forward, warning Penny that there are always listening ears in the palace. Lu grabs Penny's outfit and demands to know if she's even looking for the ring. Penny snaps back, reminding Lu that she doesn't take orders from her. Lu reveals that the queen is currently looking for her, which changes the tone. Penny aggressively brushes Lu's hand away to end the confrontation. Lu turns her back and begins to walk away from the gallery. Penny watches her leave, still standing in the shadow of the portrait. She wonders why Lu remains so fiercely loyal to the queen's cause. The heavy red curtain is pulled shut, hiding the prince's image once more. Penny takes one final look at the room before making her exit. She walks away, feeling increasingly frustrated by the strange interactions. Lu marches down the hallway, her mind clearly focused on her duties. She reflects on Penny's question regarding her unwavering loyalty. The empty palace corridor remains quiet as the two go their separate ways. Sunlight bathes the exterior of the grand stone palace. Penny's boots click against the pavement as she heads out into the courtyard. She walks along the balcony, looking deep in thought about her next move. The weight of her secret mission and the missing ring hangs over her. Penny looks exhausted by the constant lying and political maneuvering. She trudges across the grounds, feeling the pressure of the queen's expectations. The thought of facing the queen without the ring makes her anxious. In the distance, Penny spots a familiar figure waiting by the garden gate. She is surprised to see the princess out and about so soon. Cher stands elegantly in her traveling attire, her face partially veiled. Penny rushes over and bows deeply, apologizing for her long absence. Cher remains calm, mentioning that she is feeling quite tired today. The princess decides to head in early to rest, just as Penny suggested. Relieved, Penny follows behind her as they walk back toward the main building. Penny glances over at Cher, trying to read her stoic expression. Cher continues walking, her composure hiding whatever she might be thinking. Penny asks what would happen if the queen finally got hold of the ring. Cher stops in her tracks and turns her head toward Penny. The two women stand in the middle of the path during a tense silence. Cher explains that the queen would ascend the throne if she secured the ring. She adds that even with the ring, the kingdom's collapse is likely inevitable. Penny processes the grim reality of the political situation. Penny suggests simply getting rid of the ring and running away together. Cher reveals that her ultimate goal is not that different from the queen's. They continue their descent down the stone stairs in relative silence. Penny is left baffled, trying to figure out what Cher's true objective is. As they move through the courtyard, Penny notices people whispering about them. She senses a shift in the atmosphere as more eyes turn their way. Penny looks around, hearing the growing chatter of the palace staff. Cher suddenly reaches out and grabs Penny's arm with a firm grip. Penny is startled by the sudden contact and the princess's urgent look. Cher tells her they need to get away from the crowd immediately. The princess pulls Penny along, moving quickly to avoid the prying onlookers. The library is filled with the low hum of conversation as various guests and staff members gather among the tall bookshelves. Penny remains alert, noticing the intense whispering coming from the shadows. She looks increasingly concerned as the rumors regarding the princess's presence begin to spread through the room. Figures in the background continue to murmur, focusing their attention on Cher's true identity. Despite the scrutiny, Cher maintains her disguise, standing calmly with a wide-brimmed hat and a book in hand. Penny watches as Cher casually flips through pages, wondering if she even notices the eyes following her every move. Concerned about the growing attention, Penny asks if the princess has anywhere else she needs to be today. Penny excitedly suggests running errands to avoid a potential encounter with the queen. Cher abruptly shuts her book and suggests that Penny should find something interesting to read instead. She recommends a specific travel guide meant for the wealthy, highlighting imperial destinations. With a slight smile, Cher admits that she frequently reads books about travel and far-off places. The two continue their conversation while navigating the narrow aisles of the massive library. Penny is then asked to head to the second floor to fetch a book titled Lake Fairy. Penny quickly rushes off to fulfill the request while Cher remains behind to wait. The stairs lead up to a quiet, secondary level of the library where the specific genre is kept. Penny's hand pauses over a row of leather-bound spines as she searches for the correct title. After finding the book, she stands still for a moment, reflecting on Cher's strange behavior. She sits down briefly to skim through the pages, wondering if Cher truly intends to leave the empire. Frustrated by the uncertainty of the situation, Penny slams the book shut with a loud sound. She grips the wooden railing tightly, debating whether she should confront Cher about her motives. Looking down from the balcony, she realizes that the crowd below has grown significantly larger. Onlookers are gathered in small groups, staring directly at the spot where Cher is standing. Penny leans over the edge, worried that the princess is completely surrounded by curious spectators. She wonders if Cher is genuinely oblivious to the crowd, or if she is simply choosing to ignore them. Cher finally looks up from her reading as the whispers around her become impossible to miss. Penny rushes back down the stairs, arriving at Cher's side while catching her breath. She glances around nervously and asks if Cher is feeling all right under the weight of so many stares. The library is now packed with people who are openly watching the pair's interactions. Cher calmly notes that the crowd is merely interested in the rumors following her recent public appearance. She points out that Penny's constant use of formal titles is what gave away her identity despite the disguise. Penny quickly apologizes for the slip-up, but Cher reassures her that they won't be staying much longer anyway. Penny suggests borrowing the books so they can finish reading them in a more private setting. Cher agrees that the current environment is uncomfortable and prefers to continue in her own room. Penny offers to handle the checkout process and promises to return the books later on Cher's behalf. However, Penny quickly realizes that borrowing books from the royal library might involve strict procedures. At the main counter, a librarian sternly demands to see an identification card before allowing any books to be taken. Penny tries to explain that she is assisting the princess, but the librarian refuses to bend the rules. Penny is caught in a difficult spot, unable to reveal Cher's identity without causing a larger scene. The librarian remains firm, placing a hand on the stack of books to prevent Penny from taking them. Penny looks back at Cher, feeling the pressure of the standoff at the checkout desk. The surrounding crowd continues to chatter, sensing the tension between the staff and the visitors. Cher clenches her scarf tightly, showing the first signs of being affected by the public scrutiny. Realizing the situation escalating, Cher decides it is best to leave and tells Penny they should go. Penny reaches out to retrieve the books from the counter to return them to the shelves. Cher looks startled as Penny moves quickly to end the awkward confrontation. Penny turns away, deciding that avoiding a commotion is more important than the books. Her expression is filled with a mix of worry and determination to get Cher away safely. In the rush to leave, several books fall from the counter and hit the floor with a heavy thud. Penny holds her head in frustration, feeling overwhelmed by the chaotic turn of events. The fallen books lie scattered on the floor as the crowd watches the mishap. Penny immediately crouches down to gather the books before they can cause further embarrassment. A hand reaches into the frame to help pick up one of the dark-covered volumes. Penny looks up from her knees, surprised by the sudden assistance in the middle of the crowded room. As Cher moves, a glimpse of her vibrant red hair becomes visible to those standing nearby. The onlookers whisper urgently, confirming that the person with red hair and yellow eyes is indeed the princess. A dark, symbolic image of Cher appears, depicting her as the Princess of Death amidst thorns and flowers. Penny stares at Cher, finally grasping the weight of the dark reputation that precedes her. In the confusion of the moment, the books tumble onto the floor once again. Cher turns her back on the library, ready to make a swift exit from the prying eyes of the staff. Penny reaches out toward her, urging her to hurry so they can leave the palace grounds. Cher's stoic profile is shown as she focuses on the exit, ignoring the murmurs behind her. The two walk closely together, heading for the large doors at the end of the hall. Their footsteps echo through the library as they finally escape the scrutiny of the gathered crowd, two hands clasped together tightly as the pair makes their way through the palace. Cher looks down with a heavy heart, clearly affected by the recent chaos in the library. She maintains a somber expression while being led through the quiet halls. Penny continues to lead the way, keeping a steady pace as they retreat to safety. A firm hand squeeze offers a moment of silent support amidst the tension. Back in the safety of her room, Cher sits at her vanity while Penny prepares her attire. Penny handles the garments with focus, determined to help the princess settle in. Looking into the mirror, Cher's reflection reveals the weight of her dark reputation. Penny carefully drapes a shawl over Cher's shoulders to keep her comfortable. The princess stares blankly at her reflection, lost in her own thoughts. Bright afternoon sunlight streams through the windows, contrasting with the heavy atmosphere. Cher begins to explain the origin of her Princess of Death nickname. She turns to Penny, detailing the rumors that have plagued her since the tragedy of her parents. A grim memory flashes back to the aftermath of a past tragedy, where she was the sole survivor. Cher looks in the mirror, acknowledging that surviving such an event is what led to the dark rumors. She grips her arm tightly, feeling the lingering sting of the past's isolation. A soft sigh escapes her as she recounts the division and infighting that followed the king's death. The princess stands by her bed, appearing vulnerable as she reflects on the dark history. Penny listens with a concerned expression, moved by the princess' tragic story. Realizing how much Penny didn't know, Cher notes that this is the first time she's shared these details. Cher offers a small, sad smile, encouraging Penny to ask anything else she's curious about. Penny leans against the mirror, preparing to ask about the current queen's true intentions. Cher explains that Nyla and Belle were the only family she had left after the tragedy. Penny listens, trying to reconcile Cher's affection for Nyla with the assassination order she received. A sense of suspicion grows in Penny's mind as the pieces of the puzzle don't quite fit. The room remains quiet as the weight of the political pressure on the empire is discussed. Penny stands tall, realizing that Queen's need for the throne has only recently become desperate. Cher sits while Penny rests on the floor nearby, discussing the loss of her former servants. The princess rests her chin on her hand, recounting how people avoided her out of fear. The floorboards creak as the conversation turns to the superstitions that kept everyone away. Cher walks toward the window, tired of the ridiculous rumors that everyone chose to believe. She explains how she eventually locked herself away to escape the noise of the palace gossip. Penny stands by her side, finally understanding why the princess was so hidden. Outside, the sun shines through the trees, a stark difference from Cher's self-imposed isolation. Standing on the balcony, Cher admits she has grown used to being called names and being alone. Penny reaches out, her presence offering a new sense of companionship to the lonely princess. The two stand together on the balcony, overlooking the palace grounds. Penny firmly states that she has been by Cher's side and is perfectly fine, debunking the curse. She reminds the princess that she isn't a phantom of death, but simply Princess Cher. Cher's hand rests on the railing as she absorbs the sincere words of her companion. Penny declares with conviction that she will remain by Cher's side no matter what. Birds flutter through the clear sky as the tension finally begins to lift. Cher stands alone for a moment, looking out at the horizon with a lighter heart. She touches the stone railing, feeling a new sense of resolve thanks to Penny. The pair continues their conversation, with Cher teasing that Penny must stay since she has the ring. Cher gives Penny a genuine, warm smile, thanking her for the much-needed encouragement. Penny turns to head back inside, looking happy to have cheered up her friend. The two prepare to part ways for the evening as Cher heads back into her chambers. Penny looks back one last time, noting the proximity of the garden pavilion. She responds cheerfully as she makes her exit from the prince's quarters. Penny's boots click against the stone floor as she walks away into the night. The sun sets, leaving the palace grounds shrouded in the quiet of evening. Later that night, Penny walks through the dark, shadowed hallways of palace. A large, looming shadow stretches across the floor as a maid waits at a distance. Penny maintains a serious and focused expression as she approaches her next destination. A maid knocks firmly on the door to the queen's private study. Penny watches silently as the door is opened, knowing she is being summoned. The maid gives a sharp look toward Penny before leading the way inside. They step into the dimly lit room where the air is thick with authority. Penny takes a nervous gulp, preparing herself for the confrontation ahead. A hand places a quill back into its inkwell with a quiet clink. Queen Nyla sits at her desk, framed by a wall of vibrant flowers and a sharp gaze. The queen notes that Penny has arrived earlier than expected, setting a tense tone for their meeting. The hands of the clock tick away as a late-night meeting begins in the royal study. Queen Nyla sits elegantly, taking a slow sip of tea as she prepares to discuss her next moves. Penny stands alert, waiting for the queen to break the silence. Nyla announces she'll be heading to the border in a week to meet with the Margrave. Penny listens closely, processing the shift in the queen's schedule. The queen specifies that Lu will be her escort, meaning Penny must stay behind to watch over Cher. She reinforces the main objective. Penny must continue her search for the missing keepsake. Lu hands a document over to the queen, maintaining her professional demeanor. Nyla looks over the papers, reminding Penny not to get too distracted by her time with the princess. She then brings up the recent commotion Penny caused in the library. Penny's composure cracks slightly as she realizes her secret investigations haven't gone unnoticed. Her fist clenches as she debates whether to come clean or keep up the charade. Choosing deception, Penny explains that they were only in the library to research the forest. She spins a story about Cher being curious about a local lake legend. Penny claims she suggested the forest trip as a way to isolate the princess for the mission. Privately, Penny is impressed by how easily the lie rolls off her tongue. Lu sets down more tea as Nyla questions how Penny expects to find the item without Cher's help. The queen looks contemplative, her gaze fixed on the task at hand. She murmurs about the unnecessary fixation some have on eliminating the princess. Penny is caught off guard by the queen's surprisingly dismissive attitude toward the assassination. Lu continues her service, pouring tea while the queen clarifies her priorities. Penny nods, acknowledging that the keepsake remains the ultimate goal within the palace. Nyla shifts the conversation, asking if Penny can provide a visual of the object. Penny describes a thick gold band featuring a prominent green jewel. The queen listens with a piercing, analytical stare. As Penny speaks, the tea swirls in the cup, reflecting the gravity of the situation. Satisfied for now, Nyla sets her cup down and prepares to end the meeting. The queen dismisses her, noting the lateness of the hour. Penny is stunned by the abrupt end to such a tense interrogation. She exits the study, the heavy doors creaking shut behind her. Penny starts her walk back, the quiet hallway feeling heavier than usual. Her mind races as she connects the dots from the queen's cryptic remarks. She realizes that the queen never actually ordered the prince's death, only the retrieval of the item. Looking out at the darkened garden, the weight of the conspiracy begins to sink in. Penny turns around, realizing she needs answers from the person who gave her the initial orders. She stops in her tracks, her boots clicking against the cold floor. Sensing someone nearby, she glances over her shoulder into the shadows. Lu is spotted in the distance, carrying a lantern as she moves through the corridor. The maid walks past with a cold, unreadable expression on her face. Lu casts a sharp glance back, acknowledging Penny's presence without a word. Penny lunges forward, grabbing Lu's arm to force a confrontation. She demands to know why Lu lied about the nature of the mission. Lu looks back with a chillingly calm demeanor. The silence of the palace hallway heightens the tension between the two women. Penny presses her, asking if the order to eliminate the princess was a complete fabrication. Lu simply turns away, refusing to give a straight answer. Frustrated by the evasion, Penny's anger begins to flare. She grips Lu's wrist even tighter, insisting on the truth right now. Lu snaps her arm back, breaking Penny's hold with surprising force. The maid stares Penny down, her eyes full of silent threats. Penny realizes that Lu manipulated the instructions to suit her own agenda. Lu reaches into her uniform, her movements sharp and deliberate. A sudden, aggressive surge of movement catches Penny off guard. Lu's eyes narrow with an intensity that promises immediate consequences. In a flash, Lu pins Penny against the wall, asserting her dominance. She grips Penny's collar tightly, making it clear who is really in charge. Lu issues a final warning. Find the item before she decides to take matters into her own hands. Penny hits the wall with a dull thud as Lu finally releases her. Lu walks away, reminding Penny that she is in no position to challenge her authority. Penny stands alone as the sound of Lu's steady footsteps fades away. Outside, the crescent moon hangs high over the silent palace grounds. Lu fixes her hair, appearing perfectly composed after the physical altercation. She approaches a set of grand doors where the queen is waiting in the shadows. Lu stops before her sovereign, ready for the next phase of their plan. Nyla reveals she has obtained the key to the Chamber of Portraits, signaling a new turn in the investigation. A thick gold ring set with a vibrant green jewel shines against a dark, fragmented background. Queen Nyla recalls seeing this specific piece of jewelry during her wedding ceremony years ago. Sunlight streams through the high windows of a lavishly decorated palace room. Standing beside the king, Nyla steals a glance at the prominent accessory on his hand. She remembers thinking at the time that the ring appeared incredibly extravagant. A close-up of a royal portrait reveals that the king consistently wore the green-gemmed item. In the present, Nyla observes the gallery and notes a peculiar inconsistency in the paintings. She realizes that while her husband wore it, other kings in the portraits appear to be wearing entirely different rings. A lantern sits on the floor, its light flickering as the investigation continues in the dim hall. Nyla and her maid Lu walk through the corridor while exchanging a focused look. Lu explains that after a closer inspection under the light, she found the same ring in the earliest royal portraits. Nyla questions why the same piece would reappear after several generations. Lu leads the way through the gallery, explaining that the presence of multiple accessories made the discovery difficult. A detailed view shows the unique shape of the ring, with the metal wrapping around the center stone from both sides. The two women continue their trek across the patterned carpet of the portrait chamber. Wall-mounted lamps illuminate the ornate woodwork of the palace interior, standing before the line of royal images. They search for a logical explanation for the hidden accessory. Nyla considers the possibility that the royal family used layered keepsakes to conceal more important items. They discuss the physical feasibility of one ring being large enough to house another within its frame. Nyla bites her thumb in deep concentration, theorizing that the flashy exterior is merely a decoy for the true prize. They walk through the expansive, quiet hallway while questioning why the monarchs would wear such a secret every day. The glowing gold ring appears in a hazy vision, suggesting it holds a significance far beyond simple decoration. Morning light fills the palace garden as the birds begin their daily songs. Penny holds up a parchment with a triumphant shout, finally finishing a difficult task. Having worked through the night, she immediately collapses onto the table from sheer exhaustion. Princess Cher watches from nearby as the tired assassin rests her head among the ink and paper. Scrolls and books are scattered across the desk, showing the intensity of the night's work. Penny lifts her head slightly, looking weary as she presents her findings to the princess. Cher picks up the meticulously drawn map and begins to inspect the terrain layout. The two sit together at the table to go over the final details of their escape route. Finding the detailed map too complex, Cher swipes it aside in favor of a much simpler version. Penny stands up and confirms that the simplified map is ready for their departure. Cher pauses to adjust her hair, looking thoughtful as the reality of their journey set in. She taps her fingers on the table, calculating that it will take approximately 2 weeks to reach the border. Cher maintains a calm demeanor, knowing they must time their exit perfectly to avoid detection. They sit across from one another, planning to be deep in the foggy forest before the queen returns. Penny offers a confident smile, glad they were able to prepare everything in advance. Cher rests her chin on her hand, listening as they finalize the logistics. From the terrace, they look out over the palace grounds where they spent so much of their time. Cher explains that she learned the palace secrets by listening to the chatter of wandering servants. Penny looks surprised and begins to fidget, realizing how much the princess actually knows. Cher gives a knowing, gentle smile as she reflects on her observations. Penny reacts with a start, shocked that the princess had been aware of the situation all along. A stack of papers and a quill sit ready on the table, representing their final preparations. The two women look back on their time in the palace, feeling as though their early days were a lifetime ago. Penny asks what the princess intends to do once the green-gemmed ring is finally destroyed. Sunlight glints off the open glass doors leading out to the balcony. Cher asks if she should follow Penny after their mission is complete, causing a moment of tension. Penny lets out an awkward cow, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected suggestion. Cher looks away, noting that returning to the palace will be impossible once she becomes a fugitive. They look around the room one last time, realizing they only have a few weeks left in their current home. Penny taps her chin, trying to think of a way to make the most of their remaining time. She suddenly has an idea and stands up with renewed energy. Penny excitedly suggests they take one last tour of the entire palace while everyone is distracted. Preparations for travel, including a wide-brimmed hat, are laid out on the furniture. Penny leans forward on her hands, eagerly waiting for the princess to agree to the plan. Cher stands in thought, considering which part of the palace she most wants to visit. She turns to Penny with a soft expression and expresses her desire to see Penny's private quarters. Penny stares back in complete bewilderment, shocked by the princess's personal request. Cher asks Penny if she can visit her room, leaving the assassin completely stunned. Penny panics, imagining her messy living quarters with a toppled chair and clothes scattered everywhere. In her mind, the scene is a disaster zone of discarded aprons and a misplaced jewel box. She suddenly realizes with horror that she still has the ribbon Cher gave her for the mission. Overwhelmed by the thought of being caught with the keepsake, Penny slumps over the table in total embarrassment. Cher watches her, looking completely puzzled by the sudden breakdown. Penny waves her hands frantically, trying to come up with any excuse to avoid the room visit. The two sit in a massive, ornate hall that makes their small table look tiny in comparison. Penny promises she will clean her room until it shines before she ever lets the princess inside. Cher shifts in her seat, her dress rustling as she considers the offer. Standing up, Cher decides she will be the one to show Penny around the palace instead. Penny finds it hilarious that Cher wants to give a tour of a place she's lived in her entire life. The assassin smiles confidently, claiming she already knows every single secret corner of the building. Cher just smiles back, resting her chin on her hand while she watches Penny. Eventually, Cher stands up to begin their walk, curious to see where Penny will lead her. Heavy ornate doors click open as the duo starts their final tour. They walk down a grand staircase together, both aware that they won't be returning to the palace after this. Penny leads the way through the halls, keeping a sharp eye on their surroundings. Their path takes them outside through a field of white flowers and tall grass. Penny looks back at Cher, determined to give her a final day that's actually worth remembering. They stroll through the sun-drenched garden, surrounded by lush greenery and floating petals. Cher looks calm and radiant as she walks among the flowers. Their footsteps echo through a grand, sunlit corridor as they head back inside. Penny glances back at the princess as they approach the final destination on her list. Penny stops right in front of the massive doors to the chamber of portraits. She hesitates for a moment, wondering if now is the right time to ask a difficult question. Cher notices her lingering and asks what she's doing just standing there. Penny quickly covers, claiming she just remembered reading about this specific room in a book. Cher warns her that there probably isn't anything interesting to see inside the gallery. Penny ignores the warning and excitedly pulls the doors open, hoping to find a portrait of the princess. They step onto the patterned carpet of the quiet, high-ceilinged room. Penny rushes ahead, eager to see all the different paintings on display. Cher explains that she never really had the time to sit down and have her portrait painted. They pass by several large frames that are still covered in dusty red cloths. Cher looks somber as she mentions her sick brother and questions why people think they look alike. Penny notes that Belle's portrait is just around the next corner. As they walk down the long, narrow hallway, Penny gets lost in her own thoughts. Cher leans in and whispers right into her ear, causing the assassin to flinch in surprise. Penny turns around with a forced laugh, trying to act like she wasn't just startled. She is taken aback by how close the princess is standing to her. In her surprise, Penny's feet wobble and she loses her footing. She slips backward, letting out a cry as she begins to fall. Penny flails her arms, certain she's about to hit the floor. Before she can land, Cher quickly reaches out and catches her in a firm grip. Cher looks down at her with an intense, serious expression. Penny is absolutely mortified by her own clumsiness in front of the princess. She hides her face against Cher, wishing she could just disappear from the embarrassment. Cher looks down at her, appearing momentarily lost in her own thoughts. The princess pulls Penny a bit closer, asking if she is really that worried about Belle. The two stand together in the center of the silent gallery, illuminated by the dim light. Cher admits she feels like Penny only ever thinks about her brother, no matter what happens. She looks down at the assassin and admits she was just teasing her earlier. Cher offers a sincere apology for making Penny feel bad during their walk. Penny tries to wiggle out of the hold, telling the princess to finally let her go. Cher laughs softly and slides her hands away, releasing the assassin. Light filters through the leaves outside the window as Cher confesses she lacked the confidence to visit this room alone. Penny listens quietly, seeing a more vulnerable side of the princess. Cher gives a soft, genuine smile and thanks Penny for finally bringing her here. As night falls, the palace windows are shut tight against the darkness. A figure in a long dress moves silently through the shadows of the deserted halls. The hallway is filled with dust and furniture that has been covered up for years. Large sheets drape over the chairs and tables, giving the room a ghostly appearance. The mysterious figure approaches a set of large double doors at the end of the corridor. A hand reaches out and slowly turns the handle. Cher looks around the dim room, her face bathed in a cool blue light. She suddenly flinches, startled by a noise coming from the shadows. Turning around, she sees another woman standing at the far end of the hall. Cher and Nyla stand face to face in the moonlight, shocked to run into each other. Nyla and Cher face off in the dimly lit palace corridor, the tension between them palpable. Cher stares at her aunt, searching for answers in the oppressive silence. Nyla's hand trembles slightly as she grips her dress, betraying a rare moment of internal conflict. Cher looks away, unable to maintain the heavy eye contact. Nyla maintains a stoic and unreadable expression despite the pressure. She continues to watch the princess with a cold, piercing intensity. Cher looks up, startled as the atmosphere grows even more strained. A hand reaches out and turns the heavy door handle to end the confrontation. Nyla pauses at the threshold, casting one final, lingering look back at Cher. The scene is framed through the lush foliage of the palace windows. Cher calls out, directly questioning Nyla's true motivations regarding the throne. The vast, empty hall echoes with the weight of her accusations. Cher steps forward, refusing to let her aunt leave without an answer. Cher clenches her hands together, demanding to know why the kingdom is being plunged into war. Nyla listens in silence, her face remaining a mask of royal indifference. Cher squeezes her hands tight, her knuckles turning white as she holds her ground. She argues that if Nyla only wanted power, she could have taken the ring by force long ago. Nyla turns her back on the princess, signaling that the audience is finished. Cher watches her go, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and lingering doubt. The ornate clock on the wall marks the passage of time during the late-night meeting. The two women stand at opposite ends of the massive room, the distance between them feeling insurmountable. Cher declares her resolve to uphold the responsibilities tied to the ring she now holds. She speaks with a new sense of conviction as Nyla continues to ignore her. Nyla walks away into the shadows without offering a single word of comfort. Cher is left standing alone in the center of the hall, processing the weight of her duty. Cher's boots click against the floor as she prepares to depart the area. She offers a final, quiet apology for the length of their late-night discussion. The large hall falls into a deep silence as the interaction finally concludes. A hand turns the doorknob, making a sharp clicking sound in the quiet space. Nyla glances back over her shoulder one last time before disappearing. The long corridor stands completely empty under the moonlight. The heavy door creaks shut, sealing the room from the rest of the palace. Nyla stands alone in the dark, contemplating her chosen path and the fact that there is no turning back. She rests her hand on the bedsheets, her thoughts consumed by the memory of Belle. The following morning brings a bright, clear sky over the kingdom. The palace courtyard is filled with activity as the staff prepares for the queen's departure to the border. Penny blends into the crowd of busy workers, keeping her head down as she carries out her tasks. She takes a brief moment to catch her breath, feeling the exhaustion of the morning rush. Other maids hurry past her, focused entirely on the logistics of the move. Penny worries that her previous questions about the princess's brother may have caused distress. The sun blares down on the palace towers, marking the start of a long day. Penny looks out from a stone balcony, surveying the surrounding grounds. From her elevated position, she watches the guards and the constant movement in the courtyard. She overhears the other servants whispering about the ongoing war and the queen's plans. As she works, she gathers rumors about the princess isolating herself in her private chambers. Penny pushes through a group of maids to continue her assigned chores. She keeps a sharp eye on everyone, maintaining her cover while staying alert. Petals and debris float through the air as a breeze picks up around the palace. Penny sets down a heavy basket on a wooden table to finish her current task. She sits alone on a bench for a moment, feeling the weight of the impending departure. The strain of the situation is visible on her face as she considers the uncertain future. Her mind wanders through memories of her life in the palace and the journey ahead. The princess sits by the window in her room, lost in deep thought. She remains alone in her lavish quarters, separated from the chaos outside. Penny looks up with a determined expression, having formed a plan to help. Penny enters the prince's chamber carrying fresh garments for the trip. She assists the princess with her preparations, acting with practiced efficiency. Packed luggage and travel gear sit ready on the furniture. Penny kneels to finish the packing, ensuring every necessary item is secured. She carefully ties the laces of the traveling shoes to ensure they are secure. Penny suggests one last visit to the chamber of portraits to find closure. A figure quietly enters a room, the door opening with a soft creak. Feet move across the carpet on tiptoes to avoid making any noise. Cher, now dressed in a dark traveling cloak, turns around in surprise when she realizes she isn't alone. The scene opens in a simple bedroom where the morning sun streams through the window. Cher stands ready in a dark travel cloak, looking quite contemplative. She seems focused on the task ahead as she prepares to leave the palace. Entering the room, Cher notices some items left out on the table. A wooden case and small pouches sit among her travel gear. She picks up a dark ribbon, realizing it's something she recognizes. Meanwhile, Penny skips through the hall, clearly in a great mood. She carries a rolled-up parchment, eager to share what she has found. Penny bursts into the room with a wide, cheerful smile. Her excitement quickly turns to surprise when she sees Cher already waiting for her. Cher offers a gentle smile, explaining that the door was left open. She holds up the ribbon, asking why it was hidden in the room. Penny immediately breaks into a nervous sweat, clearly caught off guard. Cher reassures her that there's no trouble and asks her to take a seat. Despite the reassurance, Penny remains visibly anxious. She sits down on the edge of the bed as Cher watches from the table. Cher probes further about why the ribbon was kept so carefully. Penny admits that she kept it because it was a gift from the princess. Cher listens quietly, her expression unreadable for a moment. She suddenly turns away, leaving Penny confused by the reaction. To Penny's shock, Cher breaks into a fit of laughter. Cher admits she hadn't realized the significance of the small token until now. Penny watches her, still worried that the princess might actually be upset. Cher dismisses the concern, telling her to consider it a reward for her hard work. Reassured, Penny reaches for the scroll she brought with her. She excitedly tells Cher that she has a special gift to return the favor. Penny takes a seat and prepares to reveal what she has been working on. With a bright expression, she presents the rolled-up drawing. She begins to unroll the paper with a quick, fluid motion. The drawing is a detailed portrait of Cher's mother. Cher is momentarily frozen as she stares at the familiar face. Looking at the drawing brings back a sudden and unsettling chill. A dark memory of a glowing keepsake held in a hand flashes through her mind. Cher's hand begins to shake as she holds the parchment. She quickly tries to compose herself, hiding her distress from Penny. Cher sets the drawing down and offers a quiet word of thanks. Penny catches the subtle shift in mood and looks on with concern. Cher remains quiet, clearly affected by the sight of the portrait. Trying to change the subject, Penny suggests they put it away for now. She notices Cher's outfit and asks if there's a special plan for the day. Cher explains that she's testing out a disguise to see if she can pass as a maid. Penny gives her a skeptical look, sizing up the effectiveness of the look. Despite the doubt, Cher stands tall, ready to test her theory. The light in the room shifts as the day begins to fade. Penny decides they should head out and see if the disguise works. Night falls over the palace grounds, signaling the start of their mission. The grand architecture looms dark against the starlit sky. The pair navigates the quiet halls, careful not to be spotted. Penny finds the late-night excursion quite thrilling as they move through the shadows. They make their way across a high balcony overlooking the gardens. They finally arrive at the library, which feels much different in the dark. Inside, stacks of books and documents are bathed in the dim moonlight. Penny suggests looking for a book about a legendary lake. They walk through the aisles, discussing the old stories of wish-granting waters. Cher points out that the story is likely just a myth from a single book. Penny counters that Cher herself included a lake on her own map. Cher looks up, noting that believing in such things makes the path ahead feel less daunting. Cher turns to her companion, calling out her name softly. 2 golden keepsakes keepsakes clink together, shimmering in the night air. They stand together in a field illuminated by dozens of fireflies. A hand grips the chain tightly, signaling a firm commitment between them. Cher looks ahead with determination, stating they are now partners in this journey. Surrounded by the glowing insects, the two prepare to face whatever comes next. Sunlight filters through the leaves as the final moments in the palace pass in relative silence. The morning air is still, but a quiet cough breaks the peace of the garden. Penny reviews a set of documents with a focused and serious expression. Cher and Penny sit at a stone table to discuss the final details of their escape plan. Penny listens intently as Cher goes over the instructions one last time. The duo identifies their route through the kingdom's city center from the shelter of a gazebo. Birds chirp overhead while they plan to gather essentials before heading deep into the forest. Under the cover of darkness, they make a quick dash across the palace grounds. The stone bridge stands empty, allowing them to move without being spotted by the guards. Two cloaked figures traverse the bridge, moving stealthily toward the exit. Penny warns Cher to watch her step on the slippery moss covering the path. Cher looks down with a somber expression, feeling the weight of leaving her home behind. She clenches a small charm tightly in her hand, trying to steady her nerves. One hand reaches out to provide support during the difficult trek. They hold hands firmly to ensure they both stay upright on the treacherous ground. Penny hesitates for a moment, checking on her companion's condition. The two stand together against the night wind, fully committed to their journey. Cher's face shows a mix of determination and lingering sadness. Penny asks if Cher is feeling well enough to continue or if they should wait until tomorrow. Cher insists they must leave immediately to coordinate with her aunt's arrival at the border. Penny accepts the plan and prepares to lead the way forward. She helps Cher adjust her hood to ensure her identity remains hidden. Penny gives a spirited shout to keep their spirits high despite the tension. Their boots step quickly and quietly as they accelerate their pace. A cloaked figure rushes through the dark corridors of the palace structure. Cher feels a chill and reflects on her physical state as they move through the night. She follows closely behind Penny but finds herself mentally pulled back into the past. A dark memory surfaces of a voice questioning where the princess is going. Cher experiences a haunting vision of a hand reaching toward her. The memory of a woman's face looms over the palace, creating a sense of dread. A jarring thought about Belle's fate causes Cher to freeze in place. Penny stops and looks back, sensing that something is wrong with her partner. Cher begins to wobble, her strength failing as the mental strain takes its toll. Penny rushes toward the falling princess in the dimly lit hallway. Cher lies on the ground, struggling to catch her breath and shake off the shadows of her memory. A sudden flashback reveals a field of vibrant flowers under a bright sky. A younger Cher turns around with a look of surprise and joy. Aunt Nyla appears in the garden, standing elegantly among the blooming roses. The children rush forward to give Nyla a warm and happy hug. Young Cher quickly apologizes for her overexcited reaction. Nyla looks down at the children with a gentle and affectionate smile. The group gathers for an outdoor snack in the sun-drenched palace garden. A tray of colorful cookies and tea is laid out for their enjoyment. Nyla spends quality time with Cher and Belle, making sure they feel included. Cher recalls these moments as a time when she never felt truly alone. Nyla watches the children play with a look of quiet contentment. In the distance, Cher's mother and other nobles stand together on the lawn. Cher looks back toward her mother, feeling a sudden sense of uncertainty. The Queen Mother waves elegantly to her daughter from across the garden. The narrative notes that while distant, the mother still maintained an interest in her daughter's life. The Queen walks beside Cher, mentioning Nyla's penchant for baking treats. The royal party encounters a group of nobles during their afternoon stroll. A noblewoman praises Cher, noting her recent progress in learning swordsmanship. A servant approaches to deliver an urgent message to young Prince Belle. Cher watches as Belle follows the staff back toward the main building. Pink blossoms drift through the air as rumors of future marriage proposals begin to circulate. Belle smiles brightly while participating in the garden tea party. Nearby, noblewomen discuss the various political options available for the throne. The Queen Mother stands regally among the purple roses, maintaining her poised and commanding presence. A royal crown rests on a velvet cushion, representing a family tradition rooted in power. Shadows loom over the young princess as the narration details a thirst for absolute control within the lineage. Text introduces Prince Belle, the son of Nyla, as a key figure in this historical web. Young Belle and Cher stand together in a garden, their bond clear even amidst the formal atmosphere. A gloved hand carefully sets down a teacup, marking the start of a routine afternoon. Years later, a 16-year-old Cher sits in the garden, her expression filled with a quiet melancholy. She looks off into the distance, appearing distant and contemplative. In the background, palace staff gather and whisper, likely discussing the current state of royal affairs. Cher sits alone in her ornate chair, wondering if she can ever truly find a moment of peace. Birds flutter through the lush green trees above the garden. From a high angle, Cher is seen isolated in the center of a grand gazebo. She rests her gloved hands on the edge of the table, feeling the weight of her schedule. Looking down, she reflects on the recent assembly and her upcoming tea time with her mother. She leans forward, her posture showing signs of mental and physical fatigue. Suddenly, she flinches as if hearing a familiar voice call out to her. She quickly turns around in her seat to investigate the sound. Looking over her shoulder, She scans the garden for the source of the interruption. Behind a nearby fence, a young Belle appears, waving cheerfully to catch her attention. He explains his secret entrance through a hole in the fence while Cher watches from her seat. Cher looks on in surprise as the boy flashes a playful peace sign. A warm smile finally spreads across her face as she talks with her friend. She turns back toward her table, trying to keep their meeting a secret from any prying eyes. Meanwhile, Queen Nyla and another woman converse nearby, their expressions cold and calculating. Cher is seen tiptoeing through the grass, engaging in a forbidden meeting. Belle hands over a small gift, mentioning that his mother baked some cookies for her. Cher stands in the tall grass, enjoying the thrill of their secret encounter. She accepts a small, paper-wrapped package, turning their friendship into a sort of game. The scene shifts back to the grand gazebo as weeks pass by in this manner. Cher eventually sits across from her mother for a formal tea session. The queen mother smiles gracefully while addressing her daughter. Cher begins to sweat, feeling a wave of anxiety under her mother's intense gaze. She clenches her gloved hand tightly around the handle of her teacup. The queen mother suggests inviting Queen Nyla and Prince Belle to join them for tea. Cher's face immediately lights up with genuine excitement at the proposal. Sunlight filters through the trees, mirroring the brief moment of hope. A plate of the chef's specialty cookies is placed prominently on the table. However, the actual tea party is shrouded in a heavy, awkward silence. Belle tries to break the tension by politely complimenting the delicious cookies. The queen mother responds with a polite but scripted smile. She casts a sharp glance toward Nyla while taking a sip of her drink. Nyla looks down at the table, clearly feeling out of place in this cold environment. Belle and Cher continue to eat their cookies, finding comfort only in each other's presence. Nyla offers a soft, sad smile, perhaps sensing the underlying danger. The group remains gathered at the table, though the atmosphere is far from friendly. A close-up of the queen mother reveals a subtle, knowing smirk. Rain begins to fall, signaling a dark turn in the narrative. The sound of heavy coughing echoes through the silent palace halls. A tray with water and medicine is prepared for the ailing princess. Cher lies in bed, looking pale and completely drained of her usual energy. Her eyes are heavy and feverish as she struggles to stay conscious. She stares up at the chandelier, losing track of whether it is morning or evening. Cher shivers uncontrollably, unable to feel any warmth in her body. A maid enters the darkened bedroom as Cher sits up, looking fragile. The princess looks on as the servant reaches for a tray. The maid brings a glass of special pink liquid, claiming it was sent by the queen mother. Cher looks at the drink with a hint of suspicion and hesitation. Eventually, she reaches out and grabs the glass from the tray. She drinks the liquid down while the maid stands by and watches. Two maids stand in the room with their backs turned, maintaining a chilling distance. Cher sits back in bed, holding the empty glass with a dazed and vacant expression. Outside, a thunderstorm rumbles, casting a shadow over the prince's palace. Rumors of illness spread throughout the palace as both the prince and princess remain in a fragile state. Cher enters the room with a look of deep concern for those she cares about. Inside, Nyla remains by the bedside of the unconscious prince while Cher looks on. Belle remains in a deep sleep, his breathing heavy as he struggles with his condition. Nyla prepares some food, hoping the prince will wake up before it loses its warmth. Cher stands nearby, her mind occupied by thoughts of her friend's well-being. The princess turns her attention toward Nyla as the older woman calls out to her. Nyla takes a seat and invites Cher to come closer for a moment of quiet reflection. Vulnerability shows on Cher's face as she approaches the bedside. Seeking comfort, Cher leans against Nyla while they both watch over the sleeping prince. Nyla notes that Cher still feels cold from her own recent bout of illness. Cher clenches her hands tightly, overwhelmed by a sense of guilt. A fire crackles in the hearth, providing the only source of warmth in the somber room. Nyla glances toward the flames, her expression unreadable. Cher recalls how Belle's health declined immediately after their recent tea time. She wonders if the cause was the chilly weather or perhaps an unexpected allergy. Her thoughts suddenly snap to the cookies they shared during their secret meeting. Realization dawns on Cher as she looks up at Nyla with wide eyes. Nyla offers a supportive embrace to help steady the trembling princess. The queen reminds Cher that she was also unwell, trying to ease the girl's burden. Cher grips Nyla's arm as she hears that Belle was briefly awake the previous day. Looking up with a glimmer of hope, Cher searches for any sign of good news. Nyla promises to do everything in her power to help the prince recover. Outside, the autumn leaves flutter in the wind as the seasons begin to shift. Cher realizes that Belle's symptoms are nearly identical to the ones she just overcame. She remembers the specific remedy her mother provided that led to her own quick recovery. Driven by a new plan, Cher rushes through the palace corridors to find her mother. A glass clinks onto the table during a formal meal with the queen mother. Vyathan observes Cher with a cold smile, noting how healthy the princess looks. Cher feels a surge of nerves as she faces her mother's piercing gaze. The princess explains that she feels responsible for her brother's current state. Vyathan agrees to provide the necessary medicine, her expression remaining guarded. Cher is filled with relief, believing her mother is finally showing a hint of kindness. The queen mother maintains an air of effortless elegance while agreeing to the request. A celebratory toast marks the beginning of the official preparations for Cher's succession. Time passes quickly, and the autumn trees drop their vibrant leaves across the grounds. Despite her busy schedule, Cher makes it a point to visit Belle's room every single day. She sits by his side, telling him that the medicine will arrive soon. Belle rests his hands on the covers, his strength still failing to return. Cher looks down, unable to hide the sorrow in her eyes as she apologizes to him. Belle insists that she has nothing to be sorry for, showing his unwavering kindness. He places a hand over hers, urging her to focus on her own health instead. A gentle smile forms on Belle's face as he tries to reassure the princess. He speaks softly, his primary concern being Cher's happiness. Cher remains silent, her heart heavy with the weight of her secrets. To lift her spirits, Belle suggests they plan a trip together for the future. He excitedly describes a treasure hunt using the old maps they drew as children. Cher smiles at the thought of their shared adventures, even if they seem far away. Belle's playful ideas bring a rare moment of genuine laughter to the room. The princess agrees to the plan, promising they will go once things are settled. Belle looks toward the window, dreaming of a journey in the springtime. Winter arrives in full force, blanketing the palace training grounds in deep snow. Cher finds herself buried in work as she prepares to take on her role as heir. Standing alone in the cold, she looks every bit the future ruler the palace expects. She brushes her hair back, her thoughts drifting away from her royal duties. Later that night, Cher sits in front of her mirror in the silence of her room. She stands up, her anxiety about Belle becoming impossible to ignore. Looking out at the moonlit night, she realizes it has been too long since she checked on him. Cher worries that the medicine her mother promised has never actually arrived. She lets out a heavy sigh, unable to shake the feeling that something is wrong. Determined to see him, Cher flings open her doors to head toward the prince's quarters. Her path is immediately blocked by guards who cross their weapons to bar her exit. Cher confronts the guards blocking her path, demanding to know the reason for the sudden change. A maid delivers Queen Nyla's orders, explaining that the princess is no longer allowed to leave her room unattended. Cher is stunned by the cold announcement, realizing the walls are closing in on her. The heavy doors are slammed shut, cutting her off from the rest of the palace. She rattles the handle in desperation, but the lock holds firm against her efforts. Standing alone in the center of the room, Cher realizes she has been effectively imprisoned by her own mother. Cher contemplates her mother's schemes, wondering how long she has been watched. She stares out at the dark night, suspecting that every move she made was part of a larger plan. Desperate to reach Belle, she searches the room for any possible way to bypass the guards. Her expression hardens as she decides to risk everything to escape her confinement. Cher flings the window open, braving the cold night air to find a path out. She uses a long piece of fabric to create a makeshift rope, draping it over the balcony railing. Her feet hit the grass as she successfully descends to the palace grounds. Landing with a heavy thud, she quickly gathers herself to avoid detection. Cher looks back nervously, ensuring the guards at her door remain unaware of her departure. She sprints through the dark woods, guided only by the faint light of the moon. Reaching another wing of the palace, she pauses to catch her breath, her heart racing with fear and hope. Cher carefully eases a heavy door open, slipping into the silent hallway. She moves with caution, her eyes searching the shadows for any sign of movement. In a dimly lit room, she spots a familiar figure standing near the window. Cher approaches slowly, her breath hitching as she realizes something is terribly wrong. She notices dark stains on the floor, indicating the severity of the situation. Belle leans heavily against the window frame, clutching his chest in visible agony. Cher rushes to his side just as he stumbles and collapses to the floor. She catches him in her arms, her voice trembling as she asks what has happened to him. Belle struggles to speak, mentioning that he felt a strange, burning sensation after taking his prescribed medicine. Cher holds his face, seeing the devastating effects of the poison taking hold. She is overcome with guilt, blaming herself for ever asking for the remedy or involving him in her life. Cher cries out in anguish, wishing she had never approached Belle or his family. Belle reaches out with his last bit of strength, telling her that none of this was her fault. He urges her to live for herself and not to follow the path others have laid out for her. With a final gesture of comfort, Belle fades away, leaving Cher alone in the silence. The room feels cavernous as Cher kneels beside his lifeless form. She whispers his name one last time, but the only response is the cold wind outside. Cher hesitates, feeling the warmth still leaving his body and hoping for a miracle. She sprints back through the palace, frantically searching for anyone who can provide assistance. Looking out from the balcony, she sees the vast, empty courtyard, realizing how isolated she truly is. A flickering candle in the hallway highlights her desperate search for a friendly face. Cher cries out to the empty halls, wondering why such a grand palace feels like a tomb. She remembers the nights outside her quarters and hopes they might still help her. She flings the doors to her room open, expecting to find guards, but finds a much more sinister presence. Cher stands frozen at the threshold, shocked to see the Queen Mother waiting for her. Vathan rises from her seat, greeting her daughter with a chillingly calm demeanor. Vathan picks up a small vial, remarking on how unfortunate the night's events have become. She explains that Belle's demise will be blamed entirely on Cher's actions. The Queen Mother sets the vial down, finalizing her plan to manipulate the succession. Cher realizes with horror that the poisoned cookies were a trap meant to frame her. Vathan insists that Cher must ascend the throne without any scandals attached to her name. Guards suddenly seize Cher, holding her firmly as her mother approaches. Vathan forces a tainted cookie in Cher's mouth to seal the false narrative. An empty vial rolls across the floor as the forced poisoning is completed. Cher collapses to the floor, coughing violently as the substance begins to affect her. Vathan looks down with a cold, detached expression, showing no remorse for her daughter's pain. Cher's vision blurs as she struggles to stay conscious against the overwhelming betrayal. A dark dark haze descends as she is told to sleep until the political storm has passed. Cher eventually wakes up in her bed, her mind clouded by the trauma of the previous night. She looks out the window, seeing a world that has already moved on from the tragedy. A maid enters the room to check on her, acting as if nothing unusual has occurred. The window is shut tightly, reinforcing Cher's status as a high-profile prisoner. Black banners flutter from the castle spires, marking the end of an era and the start of a funeral. The maid informs Cher that the Queen Mother has ordered her to attend the final day of the ceremony. Cher clenches her fist against the frame, her grief transforming into a silent, burning rage. The palace remains a cold, grand stage where the political landscape has shifted forever. News of a massive feud between the nobility and Queen Nyla spreads like wildfire. In the chaos, Viathan took the opportunity to eliminate the king and consolidate her power. Cher remains locked away, waiting for a judgment or a visit that never comes. She stands before the ornate doors of her room, abandoned by everyone she once knew. 2 years pass in total isolation, with Cher becoming a ghost within the palace walls. Finally, she steps out onto her balcony, ready to embrace the title the people have given her, the Princess of Death. A sharp knocking echoes against the large, ornate wooden doors of the royal chamber. Cher ignores the sound and walks toward the balcony as the handles continue to rattle. A tray of soup and salad is slid through the gap as the door is quickly locked from the outside. Looking down with a hollow expression, the princess stares at the simple meal provided for her isolation. She crouches down to retrieve the tray, a routine she has endured for 2 long years. In another part of the palace, a woman stands by a window, reflecting on the war that has consumed the kingdom since the king's death. A hand clenches a decorative keepsake on the table, symbolizing the fractured authority of the crown. Cher remains lost in thought, her eyes reflecting a deep sense of resignation. She spends her days leaning over the balcony, overlooking the quiet palace gardens. Resting her head on the stone railing, she watches the birds and the swaying trees. A close-up shows her golden eyes tracking the movement of a bird fluttering nearby. She stays perfectly still, observing the creature as it takes flight. Suddenly, a bright light gleams from the tall grass in the restricted area below. Cher turns her head in confusion, wondering what could be reflecting the sun so intensely. A hand holds up a sparkling translucent charm, catching the light perfectly. A mysterious figure with blonde hair lies casually in the grass, playing with the trinket. Cher is visibly stunned to see anyone in the garden that has been empty for years. She murmurs a name under her breath, her expression softening for a brief moment. The stranger remains relaxed on the ground, completely unaware of the princess watching from above. When the figure suddenly sits up, Cher flinches back in surprise. She quickly ducks behind the stone pillars to avoid being spotted. After a second, she carefully peeks back over the edge to get a better look. She grips the railing tightly, noting the stranger's distinctive features. Thoughts of Aunt Nyla's military conscriptions cross her mind as she tries to identify the intruder. Cher stands tall on the balcony, her curiosity finally piqued after years of silence. The blonde figure suddenly dashes away, disappearing behind the massive palace columns. A glimpse of hair is seen as the person attempts to hide behind a vine-covered wall. Seeing the clumsy attempt at stealth, Cher can't help but let out a small, knowing smile. She eventually steps back inside and closes the glass doors to her room. Over the following days, she returns to the balcony repeatedly, finding the stranger's presence strangely comforting. She recalls the dark liquid that changed her life forever and the accusations that followed Belle's death. The memories of that tragedy haunt her even as she watches the stranger rest under the trees. Cher realizes she has become genuinely interested in this mysterious person. Her reverie is broken by a sudden, loud knocking at her bedroom door. She turns away from the balcony and walks toward the entrance to see who it is. A pair of sturdy boots stands at the threshold as the heavy doors swing open. A stern-faced maid stands there, ready to deliver a message from Queen Nyla. Cher listens blankly as she is informed that a new lady-in-waiting will be assigned to her starting tomorrow. As the door shuts, she slumps to the floor, overwhelmed by the sudden change. She slowly pushes herself back up, her mind racing with the potential danger of this new arrangement. Night falls over the estate, casting the balcony in a cool, ethereal blue light. Cher stands alone in the middle of her dark room, surrounded by her few belongings. She looks at her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her dress as she prepares for the worst. Her hand drops to her side, the weight of her isolation finally reaching a breaking point. Discarded clothes are scattered on a nearby chair, reflecting her internal chaos. Staring into the glass, she suspects that Nyla has finally sent someone to finish her off. She wanders out into the garden under the moonlight, walking through a field of white flowers. She looks down with a heavy heart, accepting the grim fate she believes is coming. She finds a patch of flattened grass where the mysterious stranger usually rests. Overcome with exhaustion, she collapses onto the ground in the middle of the field. The next morning, Cher walks barefoot across her room, feeling the cold floor beneath her. She opens the balcony doors one last time to face whatever they bring. The garden pavilion stands empty and silent in the morning light. A cheerful voice suddenly rings out from behind her, breaking the silence. Penny, the new lady-in-waiting, greets the princess with a bright, beaming smile. Cher's face twitches in shock at the unexpected warmth of the greeting. She stares at the new arrival, her guarded heart caught completely off balance. Cher stands in a garden with Penny nearby, wondering when her life might be taken. She leans her head against the blonde girl, feeling a deep sense of internal conflict. Looking away, the princess questions if she has completely misunderstood her lady-in-waiting's true intentions. Dark, swirling thoughts consume her mind as she grips her hand in frustration. Clenching her clothes, Cher realizes there is no easy escape from her current predicament. The princess and Penny sit on the floor of a large room, staring at each other in a moment of shared shock. Tears well up in Cher's eyes as she looks on with a pained expression. A reflection of Penny is visible in her teary eye as she stares intently at her companion. Liquid drips down from above as Cher remains frozen in place, lost in her emotions. Cher recalls a vision of Penny standing in a sunlit garden, dressed in casual attire. A small charm clinks against Cher's clothes as she reaches out to secure the keepsake. Kneeling on the floor, she resolves to find a way to destroy the specific charm during her next trip to the forest. The camera pans across a luxurious room filled with ornate furniture and large windows. Penny finishes styling the princess's hair in front of a grand vanity mirror. Cher looks at her new appearance, appearing satisfied with the result. Penny laughs cheerfully while Cher touches her hair, feeling a bit self-conscious. The lady-in-waiting leans in to offer a compliment, noting that the princess looks ready for a ball. A hand reaches out to touch Cher's shoulder, causing her to flinch slightly from the contact. Cher turns her head in surprise as Penny continues to interact with her in a friendly manner. Penny breaks into a nervous sweat, realizing her informal behavior might be too much. The two share a light-hearted moment, laughing together inside the room. Cher lets out a genuine laugh, momentarily forgetting her worries and isolation. Her expression softens as she reflects on the fun they have shared recently. She hesitates, her mind drifting back to thoughts of her lost brother Belle. A hand gently holds a single strand of blonde hair, serving as a painful reminder of the past. Cher stands behind Penny in the middle of the room as sunlight streams through the windows. Cher's gaze becomes sharp and focused as she looks down at her companion with a cold intensity. Penny sits in a chair with a bright, innocent smile, unaware of the shift in mood. Cher pulls back suddenly, her hand trembling as she realizes her own cruel thoughts. She stands alone in the grand hallway, unable to let go of her memories. Sunlight filters through a field of tall grass and wildflowers in a fleeting vision. Cher closes her eyes tightly, trying to suppress her growing emotions. Penny promises to remain by the prince's side as a loyal lady-in-waiting. Cher opens her eyes, looking surprised by the sudden and bold declaration of loyalty. Penny stands in the middle of a sun-drenched field, offering comfort to the isolated princess. Cher looks off into the distance, fearing that her companion will eventually leave without hesitation. Multiple hands reach out in a blurred motion, representing a desperate hope for a real connection. A hand twitches slightly while resting on a dark surface as consciousness returns. Cher wakes up with a start, sweating and confused about her new surroundings. Her vision is blurry as she tries to make sense of the unfamiliar room. Sitting up in a simple wooden bed, Cher realizes she is no longer inside the palace. She notices that her hair has been neatly braided and her clothes have been changed while she slept. Cher examines her new attire, assuming Penny must have been the one to assist her. She turns around to explore the rustic room, looking for any sign of her companion. Looking out the window, she sees a small, peaceful village nestled in the valley below. She rests her hand against the glass, reflecting on how she collapsed and ended up in this place. A heavy wooden door creaks open, revealing the entrance to the building. Cher walks out onto a wooden balcony overlooking the ground floor of a busy tavern. She leans over the railing, her expression unreadable as she observes the activity below. Several people are gathered at tables in the common area, enjoying their evening. Penny is seen downstairs, energetically arguing with another woman over a small matter. Cher watches the scene with a mixture of confusion and growing curiosity. The moon reflects off the surface of a dark, rippling pool of water outside the palace. A woman in a dark dress stands by a fountain, her back to the camera as she waits. A servant informs her that the lodgings are ready and suggests she get some rest. The woman in the blue dress dismisses the servant, wanting to be alone with her thoughts. The servant bows and prepares to leave, but stops when a final question is asked. The wind whooshes through the trees as a secret conversation takes place in the moonlit garden. A leaf falls into the fountain as the servant questions why the princess and Penny were allowed to leave. Lou stands silently in the palace garden under the moonlight, while Nyla reflects on the fragile state of the kingdom. The two walk past the fountain, discussing the political risks of a war with the Margrave. Nyla rests her hands on the stone railing, noting that they are in no particular rush to find the king's missing ring. Despite her exhaustion, she remains determined to claim the throne for herself. She smirks, considering how Cher and Penny's departure from the palace might lead to an unexpected outcome. Petals drift into the dark water as she calculates the risks of the princess contacting the Empire. Cher looks on with a distant, melancholic expression. Nyla questions what the princess intended to do if she actually disposed of the royal heirloom. Lou remains stoic while the queen ponders the gravity of the situation. Nyla's grip tightens on the balcony railing as she considers the weight of her responsibilities. A memory of a distressed Cher flashes by, emphasizing the burden of the royal bloodline. Nyla stares into the distance, contemplating the history of those who wore the ring before her. Legends say the first king of Arma was a general who always carried a secret failsafe to avoid capture on the battlefield. Nyla recalls the dark history of the royal family, where betrayal and secrets led to the downfall of several monarchs. The empty portrait gallery stands as a reminder of how the kingdom's symbols of power have changed over generations. A close-up reveals the intricate jeweled ring surrounded by ominous lilies, hinting at a hidden lethal secret within the jewelry. Nyla realizes that the lack of visible wounds on the deceased king and Vathan points toward this hidden danger. She stands alone in the massive hall, certain that the true king's ring contains a hidden poison. Standing on the balcony, Nyla prepares to give Lu a new set of orders. She instructs Lu to return to the kingdom immediately after their meeting with the Margrave. Lu listens intently as she is commanded to retrieve the ring at all costs. She asks for clarification regarding what should be done with the princess. Nyla dismisses the concern, focusing entirely on securing the heirloom. As the wind catches her hair, Nyla's cold focus remains on her path to the throne. Back at the village tavern, Building sits quietly under the night sky. Inside, the candlelit chandelier sways during a heated conversation. Penny throws her arms up in frustration, insisting that they need to head upstairs. She argues with the innkeepers about dining arrangements while holding a bowl of food. Penny turns around in surprise when she realizes someone is watching. Cher stands on the wooden landing above, looking down at the commotion. Penny immediately dashes up the stairs to check on her. Cher stands quietly, dressed in the simple, borrowed clothes of a villager. Penny rushes over with 2 bowls of food, relieved that the princess woke up in time for a meal. Cher looks away, still processing her new surroundings. Penny urges her to open the door so they can eat in the room, but Cher has other ideas. A spoon clacks against the table as they settle in for their meal. Cher politely thanks the innkeeper for the borrowed clothes, much to Penny's annoyance. The princess offers a rare, warm smile when told she can keep the outfit. Penny scowls, clearly thinking the simple clothes aren't nearly good enough for royalty. An energetic argument breaks out as Penny tugs on Cher, promising to buy her better clothes the next day. Cher watches the noisy interaction with a look of exhaustion. She finally sits down to eat, while the tavern staff tries to keep the atmosphere light. A simple bowl of soup sits on the table as they begin their dinner. Penny perks up when the conversation turns toward Cher's identity. The female innkeeper chats casually with Cher, unaware of her true status. Penny jumps up to explain the local naming customs to prevent anyone from getting suspicious. The fire crackles in the hearth as Penny weaves a story to protect their cover. Cher looks at her companion, realizing how much effort is being made to keep her safe. Penny looks away, feeling a bit flustered by the attention. Cher focuses on her meal, eating quietly in the middle of the tavern. Penny comments on Cher's surprisingly healthy appetite and calls her by her name. Cher pauses, looking surprised to hear her name used so casually. She rests her hands on the table, noting that it's the first time Penny has ever called her that. The two share a brief, meaningful look across the table. Penny blushes and looks away, feeling the weight of the moment. They continue their meal in the large, empty dining room, finding a rare moment of peace. Suddenly, the scene shifts as Cher appears in deep distress, breathing heavily. A hand is gripped tightly in a moment of sudden panic. Cher looks up with wide, tearful eyes as the situation takes a sharp turn. In a chaotic scramble, Penny ends up pinning Cher to the floor to restrain her during a sudden emotional outburst. Night falls on the tavern room where the two are resting. Penny lies awake, unable to find comfort in the silence. She peeks over the edge of her blanket, checking on her companion. Cher remains still, her back turned to the rest of the room. Concern washes over Penny as she contemplates their situation. She eventually breaks the silence by whispering Cher's name. Penny jumps in surprise when she realizes Cher is actually awake. The two share a quiet conversation in the dimly lit room. Cher admits that everything still feels like a dream. Penny listens intently to the princess's rare moment of vulnerability. Cher asks Penny to drop the formal titles and use her name. The request leaves Penny completely flustered and shocked. Penny tries to brush off the awkwardness by telling Cher to go to sleep. She turns away, finding it difficult to comply with the request. Cher watches her, perhaps feeling the distance between them. They settle back into their separate beds as the night continues. Later that night, Penny sits back up, still plagued by restless thoughts. She calls out once more, but this time she gets no reply. She stares at the silent figure in the other bed. The scene transitions into a starry night sky as they eventually drift off. Morning arrives at the tavern, bringing bright sunlight and birdsong. Penny looks completely drained and gaunt from her lack of sleep. The cheerful innkeeper greets them as they prepare to head out. She laughs heartily and gives the pair an encouraging thumbs up. Cher maintains a polite facade, thanking the woman for her hospitality. Penny interjects with a grumpy expression, clearly ready to leave. She pushes Cher toward the exit, grumbling about the tavern's high prices. Penny continues to usher Cher out, eager to put the village behind them. The innkeeper waves a friendly goodbye to her departing guests. The heavy wooden door clicks shut as they step out into the street. They begin making their way through the busy village thoroughfare. Penny warns Cher that she doesn't need to be friendly with everyone they meet. She produces a fake charm on a chain, explaining its origin. Penny brags about her connections with the craftsman who made it. They continue their walk, discussing their precarious situation. Cher adjusts Penny's cloak to ensure the charm stays hidden. The sudden proximity causes Penny to blush with embarrassment. Penny quickly pulls a hood over Cher's head when she spots a familiar face. A local fruit vendor waves at them from his colorful stall. Penny explains that the man has many connections and might recognize the princess. They approach the stall to blend in with the other shoppers. The vendor encourages them to take a look at his fresh inventory. A basket sits full of bright, ripe apples. The vendor pulls out a piece of fruit and offers it to Cher. He insists that the apple is a free gift for the traveler. Penny waves goodbye as they continue their errands through town. Cher looks back at the vendor, her expression unreadable. They stop at a clothing stall to pick out more suitable disguises. The pair moves through various shops, gathering necessary supplies. They take a quick break to share a snack amidst the crowd. The busy market is full of locals going about their daily business. Penny looks around at the lively atmosphere of the town. Cher keeps her head down, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible. Banners flutter over the cobblestone streets of the vibrant city. Cher walks along the path, feeling increasingly isolated. She pauses in the town square, feeling overwhelmed by the bustle. Sitting alone on a bench, she stares down at the gifted apple. Her eyes reflect a deep sense of exhaustion and sadness. She looks up as someone approaches her resting spot. Penny finally catches up, finding Cher waiting in the sunlit plaza. Penny sits down on a stone bench to join her companion. She notes that the crowded village seems to be a bit too much for the princess to handle. Cher looks away, admitting that she hasn't fully recovered and needs to head back to rest. Penny watches her with a concerned expression, sensing something is wrong but choosing not to pry. The pair looks out over the peaceful village as Penny agrees they can return tomorrow. Back at their lodging, a dark traveling cloak is tossed over a chair. Penny steps toward the door, leaving Cher alone so she can get some much-needed sleep. Before heading out, Penny hesitates and reminds her friend to speak up if she is struggling with anything. Cher remains seated on the edge of the bed as the door finally clicks shut. In the hallway, Penny leans against the door with a heavy heart. She looks down, clearly exhausted and worried about the princess's mental state. Eventually, she pulls herself away and walks down the quiet corridor. Inside the room, Cher immediately collapses face down onto the bed. She clutches a small keepsake on a chain, her breathing heavy with distress. She curls into a ball, overwhelmed by a deep sense of fatigue. Dark memories of a rainy cemetery begin to surface in her mind. A younger version of herself stands frozen among mourners at a somber funeral. She envisions a figure kneeling in despair before a grave as the downpour continues. The mental strain makes her feel dizzy as she spirals into thoughts of being alone. Her eyes reflect a growing panic while she struggles with her internal demons. She imagines Penny walking away into the light, leaving her behind in the shadows. Cher sits alone in a mental void, crushed by the weight of her own complicated feelings. A dark, shadowy figure whispers in her ear, tempting her to use the forbidden jewelry piece. Startled by the hallucination, she panics and slips right off the edge of the bed. She hits the floor with a loud thud, gasping for air in the darkness. Her hand trembles as she reaches out for the fallen keepsake. She crouches on the floor, panting as the voices in her head urge her to take drastic action. The princess looks completely broken as the mental whispers promise that the item will bring her happiness. The small ring sits on the floorboards, catching a faint glint of light. Hearing the commotion, Penny bursts back into the room and finds Cher collapsed on the floor. Penny's face pales when she hears her companion gagging in distress. Cher remains hunched over, unable to compose herself. Penny rushes to her side with a look of pure alarm. The princess continues to struggle, her heart racing as she stays pinned to the floor. Penny grabs her hand firmly, demanding that she hold on. She grips Cher's arm to keep her steady while trying to figure out what is happening. Penny quickly realizes Cher has hidden the small object in her mouth and tries to retrieve it. After a brief struggle, Penny recoils as the item is finally dislodged. Penny stares at the floor in disbelief at what she just witnessed. She reaches down and picks up the small jewelry piece that had caused the choking. The two women sit on the floor together in the cold, blue light of the room. Cher looks away, her hair disheveled as she tries to hide her shame. She tells her friend not to worry about it, but her voice lacks any conviction. The suspicious ring lies next to its chain, separated during the chaos. Penny stands up, refusing to let the matter drop and demanding an explanation. She grabs Cher by the shoulders when the princess tries to pull away. Penny shouts, desperate to know why she would do something so dangerous. Her gaze is intense, filled with a mix of anger and deep concern. Cher remembers how she used to walk away and isolate herself in the village. Penny recalls the pain of watching her friend distance herself. Back in the present, Penny holds her firmly and asks what would change if she finally shared her secrets. Cher's expression softens as she looks at the woman who refuses to abandon her. She confesses that meeting Penny has actually made her feel more isolated because of the fear of loss. Her hand twitches on the floor as she admits how much this vulnerability terrifies her. Penny looks at her with unwavering resolve, promising she will never let go or leave her side. Cher reaches out and grips Penny's clothes, finally letting her guard down. She leans forward, resting her head against Penny as the tension leaves her body. With tears streaming down her face, Cher listens as Penny finally confesses her true feelings. Penny and Cher remain locked in a supportive embrace on the floor as the weight of their confession sinks in. Penny holds the princess close, providing the emotional comfort needed after the night's traumatic events. Resting her head on Cher's shoulder, Penny reaffirms her loyalty and her promise to never leave. Cher's expression softens as she finally finds a sense of security in their bond. Outside, the night wind rustles through the trees while the two find solace in each other's presence. Later that night, they lie together in bed, where Cher requests to be addressed by her name rather than her royal title. Penny looks at her with newfound affection, her heart full from their mutual vulnerability. Moonlight spills through the window as the long, emotional night finally draws to a close. The next morning, Penny blinks awake to the bright sunlight filling the room. She sits up abruptly, realizing she slept much longer than intended. Looking to the side, she finds the bed empty and Cher nowhere in sight. Penny scratches her head, wondering if Cher left because of the awkwardness of the previous night. She recalls the intensity of her confession and feels a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She remembers the gentle way Cher patted her head before they fell asleep. Panicked by Cher's absence, Penny rushes out of the room to search for her. She carefully tiptoes down the stairs of the inn, hoping to find the princess safe. In the common room, Cher is already up and having her hair styled by one of the inn's workers. The worker finishes the braid, helping Cher maintain her disguise while they are on the run. Cher looks composed and ready for the day's challenges. Penny watches from the stairs, relieved but slightly annoyed that Cher didn't wake her. Cher notices her arrival and turns to greet her lady-in-waiting. Penny marches over and takes a seat at the table, still processing the morning's quiet start. Cher offers a warm smile, teasing Penny about how soundly she was sleeping. Penny notices Cher is already dressed for travel and asks about their next move. She reacts with shock when Cher mentions she'll be helping the innkeepers with some local tasks. The innkeeper explains that their establishment acts as a point of contact for those trying to navigate the kingdom's borders. Penny jumps up, concerned about the potential danger of getting involved with the local guards. However, the worker assures her that the tasks are simple and won't put them at risk. The tavern is bustling with activity as travelers and locals trade information. Penny waves off the innkeeper's concerns, insisting they are capable of handling themselves. She maintains a confident front while discussing the day's logistics with the staff. Cher remains quiet, deep in thought about their precarious situation. Later, the duo heads out into the evening streets, both wearing heavy cloaks to hide their identities. Penny struggles to keep up as Cher walks ahead with a determined pace. Penny waves her hand, trying to get Cher to slow down and talk to her. Their boots click against the stone pavement as they navigate the quiet alleyways. Penny finally catches up and grabs Cher's sleeve, demanding an answer to her earlier questions. She puts on a playful smile, trying to break the tension between them. Cher pulls her arm away, clearly flustered by Penny's directness and persistence. Penny lets out a huff, feeling slightly slighted by Cher's dismissive attitude. Cher continues walking, refusing to meet Penny's gaze as she leads the way. The cool night air fills the street as they approach their destination. Cher finally stops and admits that she is simply embarrassed by how much she opened up the night before. She quickly turns and dashes away to hide her blushing face. Seeing this rare side of the princess, Penny can't help but let out a soft laugh. The two of them continue through the town, their playful banter easing the stress of their journey. They eventually reach the massive stone gates of the city. Penny stops to catch her breath, exhausted from the sudden sprint. At the gate, they notice a large crowd gathered and people arguing with the guards. Cher watches the scene with a serious expression, sensing that something is wrong. Guards are conducting thorough inspections, making it difficult for anyone to pass through unnoticed. Penny pulls her hood lower, observing the security measures from a safe distance. They move closer to the gate to get a better look at the checkpoint. Penny quietly asks if even the mercenaries working for the inn are subjected to such scrutiny. Cher nods, confirming that the security has tightened significantly since the usurpation. A guard notices them and tells them to stand back to avoid the congestion. They move away from the main thoroughfare, both sighing at the difficulty of their task. Nearby, a mercenary sits quietly, keeping a watchful eye on the gate activity. Cher looks on with a focused gaze, knowing they must be incredibly careful to avoid being caught. Footsteps echo on the stone path as the night settles over the city. Cher pulls her dark hood low, trying to blend into the shadows. The main gate is heavily guarded, with soldiers scrutinizing every traveler. Panic begins to set in as Cher realizes she has lost sight of Penny in the crowd. She moves deeper into the group of travelers, hoping to remain unnoticed. A few hours earlier, the heavy wooden doors of the inn creaked open. Cher entered the common room, keeping her head down to avoid unwanted attention. She approached an older man at a desk to gather information about the road ahead. Penny quickly intervened, questioning why Cher was asking so many risky questions. The group sat around a weathered table, discussing their next move in hushed tones. Cher looked away, feeling the weight of Penny's protective gaze. Several hooded travelers entered the room, adding to the tense atmosphere. Cher carefully observed a woman with striking red hair among the new arrivals. Penny leaned to make sure Cher was paying attention to her warnings. A single lantern illuminated the table as Penny ordered Cher to stay put for the night. Despite the warning, Cher gave a small smile, knowing she had to see things for herself. The dark leaves of the forest rustled as the scene shifted back to the present. From a high vantage point, the city looked quiet, but danger lurked in every corner. Cher peeks cautiously from behind a stone wall, monitoring the guard's movements. She watches as a guard stops a traveler, searching for someone who matches her description. The soldiers are systematic, pointing out anyone who looks suspicious. A guard places a firm hand on a woman's shoulder to check her face. Cher realizes that Nyla has likely issued a direct order to capture her. Her heart stops when a guard suddenly spots her and shouts for her to stop. The soldier approaches rapidly, demanding that she lower her hood immediately. Cher hesitates, pulling the fabric tighter as her breathing quickens. The guard strides forward, refusing to let her pass without a proper check. Cher prepares for the worst as the man reaches for her. With a rough motion, the guard grabs the hood and rips it back. Cher's identity is exposed, her wide eyes reflecting her shock. The guard immediately notes her red hair and yellow eyes, confirming his suspicions. Frozen in place, Cher waits as the man prepares to call for reinforcements. She frantically weighs her chances of escaping on foot against the trained soldiers. A sudden shout of her name makes her jolt with surprise. Penny comes charging through the street like a whirlwind. She grabs the guard's wrist with an iron grip before he can react. Using the soldier's momentum, Penny executes a perfect shoulder throw. The guard is slammed into the stone pavement with a heavy thud. Cher stands stunned as Penny quickly regains her footing. With a fierce look of determination, Penny prepares to flee the scene. She grabs Cher's hand and they sprint away as the alarm is raised behind them. They dash through the dark streets, trying to put distance between themselves and the guards. Penny scolds Cher for her recklessness while they navigate the narrow paths. Cher struggles to explain herself between heavy gasps for air. Penny scans the area, desperately looking for a way out of the dead end. They reach the edge of a high stone balcony with the guards closing in. Seeing no other option, Penny makes a split-second decision. She points over the railing toward the dark forest below. The drop is steep, but it's their only chance at freedom. Penny vaults over the side, disappearing into the darkness. She hits the ground and rolls through the thick grass to break her fall. Jumping to her feet, she looks up and calls for Cher to follow. Cher takes a deep breath and leaps from the high ledge. The two land in the soft grass, recovering from the impact. They tumble into the bushes, completely hidden from the view of the city wall. The forest remains quiet as the guards search fruitlessly above. Cher lies flat on her back, staring up at the dark sky in disbelief. Penny leans over her, checking to see if the fall caused any injuries. To Penny's surprise, Cher begins to laugh at the madness of it all. The tension breaks as they realize they've actually made it out. They sit together in the grass, catching their breath after the frantic escape. Penny offers a bright, genuine smile, relieved that they are still together. A quiet balcony overlooks the night as a conversation begins about a mysterious guard. Cher and Penny hide in the shadows of a stone wall, discussing the orders to capture a woman fitting Cher's description. Penny remains focused on the mission while relaying the intel she gathered. The princess realizes the guards didn't recognize her as royalty, but simply saw her as a common criminal. While Penny casually snacks, Cher contemplates the fact that the hunters have orders to bring her in alive. Leaning against the cold stone, Cher sighs with relief that her true identity remains hidden for now. The dark forest looms ahead, representing the dangerous path they must take to avoid further suspicion. Cher's hands fidget nervously as she weighs the risks of their next move. Deciding it's time to move, Cher stands up while Penny watches her closely. Penny explains that she went looking for the princess specifically to coordinate their departure. The duo heads back toward a local inn to prepare for the journey ahead. Inside the inn, a wooden barrel rolls across the floor, signaling the rowdy atmosphere of the common room. Penny and a cloaked Cher enter the noisy tavern, blending into the crowd of chattering patrons. A busy waitress greets the newcomers and directs them toward available seating. Cher keeps a low profile while pointing out a specific group of men to Penny. They observe a group of mercenaries who abandoned their post, now drinking and talking loudly about the queen. The rowdy atmosphere intensifies as someone slams their fist onto a table in excitement. One man stands up and loudly declares his intention to flee to the Empire. The mercenaries continue their heated debate, calling each other names over mugs of ale. Penny and Cher listen intently, gathering valuable information about the failing negotiations and potential invasions. A simple plate of food is served as the pair continues to eavesdrop on the local gossip. The men at the next table argue about the nobility fleeing the kingdom. More supplies and barrels sit nearby, reflecting the bustling trade and travel at the inn. Cher listens in silence as the patrons blame the Princess of Death for the kingdom's recent bad luck. The waitress continues her work, noting that the more people drink, the more secrets they spill. As they eat, the duo hears more complaints about the palace's incompetence. Penny leans in to reassure Cher, telling her not to let the harsh words get to her. Cher looks away, her expression hardening as she realizes the Empire won't be an easy escape. Penny remains deep in thought, processing the news of the heightened border security. The tavern remains a chaotic mess of drinking and shouting as the night wears on. Penny confirms that the guards have tightened security at the main gate, making their exit more difficult. The rowdy travelers try to recruit an older man with connections to help them cross the border. Cher asks Penny for a definitive timeline on when they will finally make their move. They overhear the group's plan to leave through the back gate early the next morning. A final toast is raised to a successful journey as the mercenaries' party reaches its peak. The rowdy cheers fill the room as the patrons commit to drinking until they pass out. Later that night, the inn finally falls silent, with empty mugs and sleeping bodies scattered around. The waitress deals with the remaining patrons, pushing them toward their rooms. One particularly intoxicated man clings to a plant, lamenting his state. A door creaks softly in the quiet hallway as someone slips out. Penny steps out into the cool night air, looking for her companion. The dim hallway of the inn remains empty and still under the moonlight. Penny finds Cher sitting alone on a high balcony and warns her about the cold temperature. Cher admits she just wanted to stay in the moment and enjoy the peace outside the palace. Looking out over the sleeping town, Cher reflects on how much fun she's had since escaping. She remembers the simple joys of meeting new people and receiving humble keepsakes from strangers. A bittersweet feeling washes over her as she wonders if she will ever experience such freedom again. Cher's expression turns somber as the reality of their situation starts to sink in. Penny walks toward her, reminding her that their journey is far from over. Cher looks down, remembering the deep bond and promises they've shared. Penny explains that life is full of hellos and goodbyes, and they shouldn't get tired yet. With a warm smile, Penny promises that the future holds even more excitement for them. Cher is struck by Penny's unwavering support and optimism. Cher reaches out, her hand hovering as she considers her feelings. The two stand close together on the balcony, the tension between them softening. Penny smiles brightly, simply happy to have shared her true feelings with the princess. They lean against the railing together, watching the moonlit trees as the night breeze blows. Cher looks at Penny with a new sense of determination and clarity. She promises Penny that she will give her a proper answer when the time is right. Under the vast night sky, the two companions stand side by side, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. Penny prepares for the day, adjusting her clothes as she readies herself for the journey ahead. She finishes buckling her belt, standing amidst their gear in the quiet inn-room. Cher wakes up and immediately asks for the time, realizing the moment of departure is near. Penny informs her that it's time to move out, though they still have a small window of preparation. Cher sits on the edge of the bed, mentally bracing for the risks they are about to take. Penny hands over some equipment, suggesting it's best to be armed for self-defense. As they move through the room, the sound of their footsteps echoes the tension of their situation. They review the innkeeper's updates on the forest map, noting that the path remains largely the same. Penny takes a moment to sit and adjust her boots, her movements showing a hint of nervous energy. She offers to help Cher tie up her hair to keep it out of the way during their escape. A hand reaches out to finalize their preparations, ensuring everything is in order. Cher looks at her finished braids, a practical style for the long trek through the woods. Penny places a steadying hand on Cher's shoulder, offering a final word of encouragement. A golden keepsake hangs nearby, serving as a reminder of what they are fighting for. Cher reaches out to touch the charm, drawing strength from the small memento. The two share a brief, determined look before finally standing to leave their temporary sanctuary. They step out of the room, their boots clicking against the wooden floorboard. Cher pulls the door shut behind them, leaving the safety of the inn for good. The empty room marks the end of their brief respite as they head toward the unknown. They discuss the risks of disguises, deciding that a poorly executed one might cause more trouble than it's worth. Sitting at a table, they finalize their plan to leave force if necessary. They visualize the gate they need to breach, noting it's often left slightly ajar. Penny explains that she will draw the guards' attention, allowing them a chance to break through. She reaches across the table to grab Cher's hand, a silent promise of protection. Penny rests her chin on her hand, contemplating the high stakes of their upcoming move. Cher pleads with her to avoid unnecessary risks and stay safe during the confrontation. Penny listens intently, promising to be careful as they prepare for the mission. Under the light of a full moon, the time finally arrives for them to make their move. A nearby brazier crackles as they approach the checkpoint, the light casting long shadows. They observe several mercenaries and guards gathered in the courtyard, making the situation more dangerous. One of the men grips his sword, confirming that the high alert status is still in effect. Guards stand at the ready by the massive wooden gates, blocking the path to freedom. A guard confronts Penny directly, barring her way as she attempts to pass through. He mocks her, mentioning the search for a redhead that matches the princess's description. Penny's expression hardens as she prepares for the inevitable clash. She quickly draws her blade, ready to fight her way past the obstruction. The sound of clashing steel rings out as Penny engages the guard in a swift duel. She leaps back to create space, shouting for Cher to stay back. Penny ducks low to avoid a heavy swing, showing off her impressive combat reflexes. A blade cuts through the air with a sharp whoosh as the battle intensifies. Penny struggles against the aggressive guards, finding them more persistent than expected. She executes a low sweep, attempting to knock her opponent off balance. Disaster strikes as several guards manage to grab Cher, pulling her away from Penny. Penny sees the capture reflected in her own eyes, her focus shifting to desperation. She grips her dagger tightly, preparing to strike back with everything she has. Penny slams into a guard with a powerful shoulder charge to create an opening. She follows up with a heavy kick, sending another soldier sprawling across the stones. Penny recovers her stance, her eyes fixed on the captured princess. More guards dash into the courtyard, surrounding them and cutting off any easy escape. Penny realizes the numbers are against her as more enemies join the fray. She rushes forward anyway, determined to reach Cher despite the odds. Penny jumps over a spear thrust, showing her agility in the heat of battle. She narrowly avoids another strike, though the exhaustion of the fight is starting to show. Blood drips onto the cold stone floor, signaling a successful hit from the enemy. Penny clutches her side, trying to manage a fresh wound while staying on the defensive. Cher watches in horror, feeling helpless as her protector is injured. Despite the pain, Penny looks up with unwavering determination in her eyes. She stands tall among the fallen guards, refusing to give up the fight. Suddenly, a mysterious figure named Lu appears on the scene, catching everyone by surprise. Lu lands in the middle of a group of incapacitated guards, her sword at the ready. She stands tall, surveying the aftermath of the brief skirmish. One of the fallen men asks why she would betray them, but Lu offers no sympathy. She turns her cold gaze away, focused entirely on her next objective. Nearby, an injured Penny reaches desperately for her discarded weapon. Lu's eyes narrow as she prepares to move again with blinding speed. She dashes across the courtyard, leaving a trail of dust in her wake. Penny watches in utter shock as the mysterious woman outmaneuvers everyone. Realizing she is far too slow to intervene, Penny's frustration boils over. Lu effortlessly parries an incoming strike while keeping a firm grip on the princess. Penny's hand trembles as the weight of her injuries finally starts to take a toll. She catches Cher as they are pushed back by the force of the encounter. Lu observes the two, noting the strong bond between the princess and her protector. She addresses Cher with formal respect, revealing that she knows exactly who she's captured. The tall towers of the castle loom over the scene as the tension reaches a breaking point. Penny grits her teeth, glaring at the woman who has ruined their escape. She demands to know why Lu isn't helping them if she knows the princess. Lu suddenly grabs Penny's wrist, cutting off her protest. She looms over the wounded knight with a mocking, superior expression. With a sharp yank, Lu brings Penny close before roughly shoving her away. Penny loses her footing and tumbles backward, completely overwhelmed. Her face is a mask of agony and defeat as she hits the ground. Lu stands over her while Penny crashes into a pile of crates in the background. Cher can only watch helplessly as Lu prepares to take her away. A sword clatters onto the stone floor, signaling the end of the fight. Lu hoists the unconscious princess over her shoulder and prepares to depart. Penny struggles to rise, her vision blurring as she watches them leave. Lu leaves her with a chilling invitation to find them at the grave if she wants to save her mistress. Penny slumps over in the empty street, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She grips her head, haunted by the failure of their mission. Clutching her wounded side, she feels the sharp ache of her physical and emotional pain. She collapses to her knees, the reality of her loss sinking in. Sweat pours down her face as she fights to remain conscious. A single drop falls to the pavement while she wonders what she can possibly do now. The discarded blades of the fallen lie silent on the cold stone. Nearby, a group of guards gossips about the princess's noble aura, unaware of the gravity of the situation. An older man approaches and grabs Penny's arm, telling her to settle down. He stands over her, asking if she has finally come back to her senses. The man takes her hand, insisting that they get her medical attention immediately. Penny looks up, dazed and unsure if she can trust anyone else. The old man helps her walk, lecturing her on the proper spirit a knight should maintain. Penny clutches her chest, her heart heavy with the memories of her promise. She recalls a quiet, hopeful night where she and the princess shared a close moment under the stars. In the memory, she holds onto Cher's dress, swearing to always be by her side. Looking back at the castle walls, Penny realizes she knows exactly where the grave is located. She resolves to return to the foggy forest, the place where she grew up among thieves. Deep within the woods, a grim stone structure sits hidden from the world. Cher lies unconscious on the floor of a cold, damp room. Lu sits nearby, calmly peeling an apple with a small knife. She looks over at her captive and asks if she is finally awake. Cher sits up slowly, disoriented and asking where they have been taken. Lu tosses a piece of the fruit aside, explaining they are now in the heart of the foggy forest. Cher looks down in silence, the gravity of her situation becoming clear. She recognizes Lu as the former lady-in-waiting who used to bring her meals at the palace. A knife remains embedded in the discarded apple on the floor as the interrogation continues. Lu confirms she is acting on the queen's orders and fully intends to deliver the princess and her ring. She reaches for her blade, her movements sharp and deliberate. Lu sits with a cold, unwavering determination, stating that her mission is the only thing that matters. Cher clutches her arm in distress, her face full of worry as she remains a captive. Lu sits nearby with a cold expression, listening as Cher questions why she follows the queen so devotedly. Clicking a blade shut, Lu wonders aloud if she even needs a specific reason for her loyalty. She reflects on a time she stood alone in a grand hall, dwarfed by the opulence of the palace. Lu realizes that Penny and everyone else have always asked her the exact same thing about her motivations. Cher's eyes widen in shock at the mention of Penny's name. Lu offers a sidelong glance, calculating that there is still enough time to finish what she started. Her mind drifts back to a graveyard where she spent time with a companion in the past. In the memory, her friend desperately brushes dirt off a headstone while speaking of her dreams. The girl sobbed about wanting to live a free life, doing whatever work she chose. Young Lu watched her silently, her expression already showing signs of the stoic woman she would become. The memory shifts to Lu being struck down, a harsh reminder of her difficult upbringing. Years later, a younger Lu looked exhausted while confined to a dim stone room. She pleaded with her captors to just let her go and end the cycle. Eventually, she walked away from that life, her mind set on a new path within the kingdom. Lu recalls the moment she secured Penny's wrists with rope during their previous encounter. She stepped away from the bound woman, claiming she wasn't hoarding wealth for her own benefit. Penny screamed from her chair that Lu would never understand her true feelings. Lu paused, looking back with a gaze that revealed nothing of her internal struggle. A heavy door creaked shut as she left her prisoner behind to ponder those words. Back in the palace, Lu walked through the dark, silent corridors alone. She stopped in her tracks upon sensing someone else's presence nearby. Queen Nyla stood by a window, bathed in moonlight and looking out at her domain. The two stood in a heavy silence, the distance between them feeling immense despite their proximity. Lu remembers Nyla appearing lost, as if she couldn't stop the path she was on. The queen gazed out at a river, her profile sharp and filled with a hidden sorrow. Nyla remarked that her journey would only end when she finally died. Lu observed her closely, sensing that the queen was a person who didn't truly understand her own emotions. As Nyla walked away, Lu was left with the realization that the queen harbored feelings she couldn't name. Lu began following the queen through the dense woods, observing her every move. She decided right then to stay by the queen's side, hoping to find her own answers through Nyla's journey. It was never easy for Lu to decipher the queen's contradictory intentions. Despite claiming she wanted to destroy the country, Nyla would spend entire nights handling state affairs over tea. While Nyla acted like she disregarded the princess, she secretly ordered Lu to provide her with meals and care. Nyla's complicated feelings toward Penny were evident in the way she refused to even look at her. Lu placed a cup of tea down, still confused by the queen's bizarre and conflicting actions. She stood faithfully by while Nyla reviewed endless stacks of paperwork. The queen looked weary, resting her head on her hand as the weight of her duties took their toll. Lu watched with a neutral face, never letting her own thoughts surface. Sunlight eventually filled the room, marking the start of another long day in the palace. Lu's footsteps echoed on the floor as she moved to attend to her master. Nyla reached out to pull back a heavy curtain, revealing the world outside. She watched the princess through the window, her gaze fixed on the girl playing in the rose garden. Lu stood behind her, silently noting how the queen observed the child she claimed to hate. Turning to leave, Lu reminded herself that it wasn't her job to understand the queen, only to obey. She walked away, content to wait until Nyla found the answers she was looking for. In the present, Nyla stands on the balcony and orders Lu to bring back the ring regardless of what happens to the princess. Lu absorbs the cold command, her face a mask of professional neutrality. Nyla turns back with a sharp, piercing stare that highlights her resolve. Lu asks for confirmation, making sure the queen is certain about her ruthless decree. Nyla confirms her order with a chillingly calm yes. Lu clenches her hands behind her back, noticing an expression on the queen she has never seen before. She vows to bring the ring back, believing that doing so will finally reveal the truth to both of them. Cher looks at Lu, asking why she is revealing such sensitive information. Lu steps forward, stating she has a specific question she needs to ask. Cher processes the grim reality that her aunt only cares about recovering the keepsake. Lu stands over the captive, questioning if she feels any resentment toward her relative. Cher looks up, firmly believing her aunt didn't truly mean to discard her. Lu clenches her hand on her leg, wondering how the princess can be so certain of her aunt's motives. Lu hesitates, looking away as if conflicted by the princess' resolve. Cher maintains that it is ultimately her aunt's decision what to do with the charm. Lu questions the logic of using the object to claim the throne when its appearance is a secret. Lu points out that the empire doesn't even know what the keepsake looks like. Lu drops her hand, suggesting her aunt just needs any reason to seize control of the kingdom. Cher shouts that her aunt intends to use the object to end everything once and for all. Lu stands in silence, processing this revelation in the center of the room. A sudden gust of wind rushes through the stone window, marking a shift in the atmosphere. Lu looks on with cold determination, claiming Cher will never truly understand her aunt. Lu slams her hand against the wall, trapping Cher in place. Lu leans in, admitting her own uncertainty about what will happen next. Lu moves her arm near Cher's neck, threatening to find the truth herself. Lu holds a blade to Cher's throat, forcing her to swallow hard in fear. Cher experiences a mental image of Penny reaching out to save her. This thought gives Cher new resolve, as she is no longer willing to simply give up. Lu reaches out toward the captive once more. Cher narrows her eyes, watching Lu's every movement with tense focus. The heavy wooden door of the ruins creaks open on its hinges. Cher wonders if Lu will actually follow through, with a lethal strike if she attempts to escape. Lu grabs Cher's collar, pulling her forward roughly. Lu reaches for the keepsake hanging from Cher's neck. Lu's hand firmly grips the chain of the charm. Cher suddenly shoves Lu back, causing the traitor to stumble away. Lu regains her footing, demanding to know how much the princess understands about the object. Cher pulls the chain, revealing the hidden double ring within the charm. Cher snaps the chain from her neck, declaring that her survival no longer matters. Lu's hand reaches for the dagger lying on the cold stone floor. Lu forcefully pushes Cher back, trying to regain control of the situation. Cher falls backward, clutching the charm tightly in her hand. Lu lunges across the ground, desperate to recover the object. Lu's hand grips the hilt of the dagger. Cher lies on the floor, hoping she can endure until help arrives. An explosion of dust and stone occurs as a horse and rider crash through the wall. Penny leaps from the horse, rushing into the center of the conflict. Penny lands with precision on the stone floor. Penny swings her weapon at Lu, who is forced to dodge the rapid strike. Lu's arm is nicked by the blade as she pulls back in surprise. Penny steps through the rubble, advancing with a cold expression. Penny delivers a powerful kick, knocking Lu away from the princess. Penny turns toward her friend, calling out her name in concern. The view shifts outside to the surrounding graves as the wind whistles through the trees. Lu's dagger clatters onto the stone floor, now out of reach. Penny turns around, her face set in a stern expression. Cher sits on the ground, looking up at her protector with visible relief. Penny notices the keepsake that Cher is holding in her hand. Penny's eyes narrow as she focuses on the object and the situation at hand. Penny reaches down and takes the charm from Cher's grasp. Penny pulls Cher upright, shielding her from further harm. Cher looks at Penny, overwhelmed by the sudden rescue. Penny flinches slightly as she handles the delicate object. Penny clenches her fist around the chain and lowers her arm. Both girls kneel on the ground together, catching their breath after the struggle. Cher looks down, reflecting on the close call and the weight of her mission. A horse stands quietly in the graveyard as the dust from the breach settles. A hand reaches out toward the blonde protector from behind, seeking her attention. A bruised hand hesitates in the air, showing the physical toll of the recent battle. Cher looks toward Penny with a weary expression as they regroup in the aftermath of the conflict. Cher expresses a desperate need to wash away the grime and stress of the day. Penny looks slightly taken aback by the request, but remains attentive to her needs. The duo leads a horse through a peaceful, sun-drenched forest as they put distance between themselves and the ruins. As they walk, they discuss how Penny managed to secure their transport. Penny offers Cher a chance to ride while she leads the horse on foot. Cher politely declines the offer, choosing to continue walking by Penny's side for now. They maintain a steady pace through the dense greenery of the woods. Cher pauses to adjust her hair as the humidity of the forest begins to set in. The group makes a quick dash through the thick foliage to reach a secluded spot. They arrive at a breathtaking waterfall that pours into a clear, tranquil pool. Penny secures the horse's reins to a nearby tree while Cher prepares to use the water. Cher removes her outer layer, seeking relief from the heat and the recent ordeal. Penny continues her work, ensuring their surroundings are safe while Cher settles by the water. Penny ties a secure knot around a sturdy trunk to keep their horse from wandering off. She pauses her movements, her mind drifting back to the history she shares with this specific location. Penny informs the princess that she will step away to provide privacy and wait nearby. Penny turns and walks into the shadows of the trees, leaving Cher alone by the shore. Cher watches her departure with a look of concern, sensing a growing emotional distance between them. She gazes at the ripples in the water, her mind clouded with uncertainty about their future. Cher enters the pool, hoping the cold water will help clear her racing thoughts. Nearby, Penny sits on the ground and begins to idly handle the recovered keepsakes. She rests against a tree, her expression turning somber as she waits in silence. Penny inspects the delicate charms, reflecting on the dangerous secrets they represent. Her gaze hardens as she wrestles with feelings of doubt regarding Cher's recent choices. She runs her thumb over the metallic charms, wondering if the princess truly trusts her protection. Overwhelmed by her internal conflict, Penny slumps forward with a heavy sigh. She leans back against the rough bark and closes her eyes, trying to find a moment of calm. Birds scatter across the sky, emphasizing the quiet stillness of the surrounding wilderness. Penny continues to hold the keepsakes tight as she remains lost in her thoughts. She looks up at the canopy, suddenly realizing that the area has become far too quiet. She stares at the surface of the water, noticing a complete lack of movement from the pool. Penny calls out to the princess, but is met with no response, fueling her anxiety. Strange bubbles suddenly break the surface of the pool, signaling that something is wrong. Panic flashes across Penny's face as she realizes Cher hasn't resurfaced. She rushes toward the edge of the water with frantic, desperate speed. Penny plunges into the shallow pool, searching the water for any sign of the princess. She swiftly retrieves Cher and carries her back toward the grassy bank. Penny lays her down and urgently calls her name, pleading for her to wake up. Cher begins to cough and sputter, showing the first signs of returning consciousness. Penny demands an explanation for why she stayed underwater for such a dangerous amount of time. Cher looks up at her with a dazed and emotionally drained expression. The two sit together on the forest floor, the underlying tension between them finally coming to a head. Penny voices her deep frustration, unable to comprehend Cher's reckless behavior. Penny clenches her fist, asking if the princess even considers the feelings of those who care for her. She pushes for a real explanation, hurt by the lack of trust shown earlier in the day. Penny looks away, her eyes reflecting a mix of profound hurt and exhaustion. The wind rushes through the trees as a heavy silence falls over the pair. Cher reaches out and firmly grasps Penny's arm, preventing her from pulling further away. A vision of a peaceful gazebo represents the life and stability Cher is terrified of losing. Cher bows her head low, finally admitting her deep-seated fears about their uncertain path. She looks up with a resolute gaze, choosing to be completely honest about her emotional state. She squeezes Penny's arm, reinforcing her desperate need for reassurance and connection. Penny looks back at her, waiting for the sincere answer she was promised. Cher leans forward to share a tender gesture of reconciliation and deep affection. She holds Penny close, offering a silent but powerful confirmation of her trust. The pair shares a quiet moment of profound emotional connection as the sun begins to set. The scene eventually fades as the tall grass sways gently in the evening breeze. The pair sits close together on the grass as the night settles in. Cher and Penny sit near a large rock, discussing the foggy forest that Penny calls home. Penny looks away, admitting that she doesn't feel the typical nostalgia for the place. She tosses a small stone into the water, reflecting on her distant origins. Cher offers a gentle smile, leaning in as the tension between them begins to fade. She touches her hair, jokingly recalling the many times she's been hit during their journey. Penny smiles back, her expression softening in the moonlight. Cher rests her head against Penny's shoulder, finally finding a moment of peace. Penny remains still, looking down with a contemplative expression. They recall an old story about a legendary lake that grants wishes to those who drink from it. The two sit by the water's edge, surrounded by white flowers in the quiet night. Cher looks thoughtful as the conversation turns toward the nature of wishes. She gazes at the shimmering surface, remembering a time when her only wish was to leave the palace and find an end. Penny's hand twitches on the grass as she considers reaching out to offer comfort. They lean against one another, sharing a quiet, supportive moment by the lake. As the sun begins to rise, Cher wakes up on the damp ground. She sits up and asks if it is already morning, noticing the change in light. Penny nods tiredly, having stayed awake all night to keep watch over their campsite. Cher notices how exhausted Penny looks and reaches out to check on her. She kneels beside her companion, grateful for the protection provided throughout the night. Cher eventually stands and walks through the dense woods while Penny rests nearby. The water splashes gently against the shore as she reaches the lake once more. Cher sits alone on the rocks, looking out over the calm water. She scoops up a handful of the clear water, letting it drip through her fingers. Suddenly, she pauses, sensing a change in the atmosphere. She continues to stare into the water, her reflection wavering. A figure appears in the rippling reflection, standing directly behind Cher. Lu reveals herself, explaining that she simply needed time to think before following them. Cher lets the water fall from her hands as Lu reminds her of the queen's strict orders regarding the royal keepsake. Cher remains crouched by the shore while Lu stands over her, demanding the item be surrendered. Cher stands up to face her, questioning the true motivation behind the hunt. She explains her belief that ending the current kingdom is the only way for her family to find happiness. The two women stand a few paces apart in the forest clearing, locked in a tense standoff. Lu maintains a cold, professional gaze, focused entirely on her mission. Cher asks directly if Lu intends to kill them even if the keepsake is handed over. Lu remains silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she promises to let them go if they surrender the item immediately. Cher places a hand on her chest and lies, claiming she doesn't have the keepsake and needs to speak with Penny. Lu's eye narrows as she weighs the truth of the request. Cher rushes back to their horse, urgently asking Penny where the keepsake was hidden. Penny wakes with a start, confused by the sudden panic until Cher explains that Lu has found them. Cher kneels and explains that she managed to trick Lu to buy them a few precious moments. Penny looks serious, realizing the gravity of their situation as they prepare to flee. Cher stands with determination, ready to make their next move. Penny reaches out, telling Cher to wait so she can secure a charm around her neck. She carefully fastens the chain, ensuring it is secure before they leave. Penny adjusts the collar of Cher's cloak as she finishes the task. They share a brief look of mutual trust and gratitude. A sudden rustle in the trees nearby causes them both to flinch. Penny looks toward the noise, sensing that their time has run out. The branches shift violently as something moves through the foliage. Rocks crumble and fall near the edge of the waterfall. Lu stands alone by the water, looking at the spot where the targets were just moments ago. She grips the hilt of her sword, prepared for the pursuit to continue. Lu surveys the clearing, noting the silence of the forest. She turns her head, realizing that the pair has already managed to slip away. She steps forward, examining the ground for any sign of their trail. High above, the forest canopy blurs as the escapees dash through the trees at full speed. The horses' hooves clatter through the dense woods as Penny asks Cher what their next move should be. Riding together on a single horse, Cher questions if Penny has any other plan to evade their pursuer. As they gallop through the trees, Cher notes that Lu has made it clear she is willing to take their lives. Cher clings to Penny, whose hands are visibly shaking from the intense pressure of the escape. Leaning into her protector, Cher admits she is struggling to stay calm under the weight of the situation. Penny maintains a determined gaze, realizing she needs to find a path where she can lead them to true safety. She pulls hard on the reins to adjust their course, suspecting that Lu has already figured out their direction. They ride deeper into the rugged terrain, hoping to buy every possible second before they are discovered. Eventually, they bring the horse to a stop and dismount to continue on foot. Penny explains that the path ahead requires walking and asks if Cher is up for the challenge. Cher nods silently, pulling her cloak tight as she prepares for the difficult trek. Standing by the horse, the duo prepares to leave their mount behind in the Rocky Mountains. Penny drops a pack to the ground to lighten their load, pointing out a stone mountain that serves as a shortcut. They begin the arduous climb across the steep landscape, hoping the speed of this route will give them an advantage. Carefully navigating the rocky incline, Penny bets on the fact that Lu won't expect them to take such a treacherous path. Penny looks back and encourages Cher to descend carefully, admitting she's been worried about the princess's state. Cher sits on the ground for a moment, visibly drained by the physical and mental toll of the flight. Taking a hesitant step on the grass, Cher tries to find her footing to keep up the pace. Penny reaches out and clasps Cher's hand, pulling her forward to ensure they don't linger too long. Penny looks back with a worried expression, noticing that Cher's energy is fading fast. With a flushed face and downcast eyes, Cher struggles to hide the fact that she is reaching her limit. When Penny asks if she's having a hard time, Cher quickly apologizes and tries to push through the exhaustion. They reach a vantage point overlooking the forest, and Penny suggests it might be safe to head back into the trees. A sudden snapping sound echoes nearby, causing Cher to flinch in absolute terror. The princess stumbles forward in a panic, and Penny is there to catch her before she falls. Penny glances around to identify the source of the noise while keeping a firm hold on the trembling princess. It turns out to be nothing more than a small rabbit, sitting quietly in the brush. Penny asks why such a small creature caused such a massive fright, but Cher remains hunched over in distress. Penny watches her closely, realizing that the fear has taken a deep hold on Cher's mind. Cher's hand clenches the earth as she battles her internal demons, making it clear she is not okay. She let out a heavy sigh, haunted by the memory of Lu's lethal threats regarding the charm. Penny reaches out toward Cher's shaking hand, wanting to offer some form of comfort. Penny reflects on all the signs of anxiety she's seen, from the trembling to the way Cher is startled by the wind. She gently taps Cher's hand to bring her back to reality and break the cycle of fear. Cher looks at her hands, paralyzed by the fear that someone else will lose their life because of her. Penny grabs her arm firmly and looks her in the eye, promising that she will not die. With a reassuring smile, Penny reminds Cher of the promise they made to survive this together. Cher stares back, desperate to believe that they can both make it out of this alive. They sit together on the grass for a brief moment of connection as the sun begins to set over the horizon. Penny continues to offer words of protection as they look out over the path ahead. They resume their walk through the tall grass, but Cher remains unconvinced by the reassurances. Looking back with a troubled gaze, Cher feels that the comfort she's being offered isn't enough to change their reality. She is haunted by the image of Lu's blade, knowing the hunter has been planning her end from the start. The pair dashes across a narrow stone bridge, desperately trying to stay one step ahead. Panting heavily, Cher realizes that keeping the charm might be putting Penny in grave danger. As Penny walks ahead, Cher agonizes over the consequences of either keeping or surrendering the keepsake. She recalls a peaceful memory of Penny, feeling the crushing weight of responsibility for their current plight. Suddenly, a metallic clang rings out as Penny draws her sword to intercept an incoming attack. Penny pulls Cher close and tells her to get behind her as the forest edge becomes a battlefield. Penny's eyes widen as she focuses on the threat that has finally caught up to them. A figure lunges from the shadows with a blade, forcing Penny into a defensive stance. Penny grips her weapon with both hands, bracing for a clash she knew was inevitable. The blades collide with a violent spark as Penny struggles against the sheer force of the strike. Lu stands before them, cold and indifferent, noting that running was ultimately a futile effort. With a swift move, Lu disarms Penny, sending her sword flying into the dirt. Before Penny can react, Lu has a blade pressed against her throat in a lethal standoff. Cher falls to the ground in horror as Lu demands to know if they are finally ready to hand over the charm. Lu maintains a cold grip on Penny, keeping her cornered while demanding the truth. Penny attempts to negotiate, bringing up the specific keepsake that Lu is after. She pulls the charm from under her clothes, showing it off to her captor. Lu's expression twitches with irritation at the sight of the item. Without warning, Lu swings a heavy blow, forcing the confrontation to escalate. Penny barely manages to roll away, narrowly avoiding the lethal strike. Seizing a brief opening, Penny lands a solid kick that trips Lu up. Lu stumbles backward, struggling to maintain her footing on the uneven ground. The two warriors lock together in a desperate struggle for control. Penny reaches out, trying to snatch an advantage from Lu's belt. Lu shoves her away with overwhelming force, sending her reeling. Stopping for a moment, Lu recovers her breath after the intense exchange. From the shadows, Cher watches the fight unfold as a mysterious glint catches her eye. Lu glares back with intense focus, deciding she'll just take both of them down. Sensing the danger, Penny shouts for Cher to retreat and find safety. Lu leaps back into the fray, refusing to let her targets escape. Her hand reaches for a blade, ready to end the standoff once and for all. Lu leans in close, mockingly pointing out that Penny's kindness is her greatest flaw. Penny collapses to the ground, flinching in pain from a fresh injury. Cher looks on in utter despair, calling out to her fallen protector. Desperate to help, Cher rushes over and tightly grips Penny's hand. Cher recalls their shared promise that they wouldn't die in this desolate place. Looking at her own trembling hands, Cher realizes she lacks the power to save Penny through force. Her gaze wanders toward the nearby waterfall, searching for any possible way out. Standing at the edge of the cliff, Cher faces the impossible choice of surrendering the charm or fighting. Penny watches from the ground as Cher prepares to take a final stand. Despite her resolve, Penny's arm continues to tremble from the severity of her wounds. They are effectively trapped between a lethal hunter and a massive waterfall. Lu stands a short distance away, silently observing their desperation like a predator. Cher reaches out to Penny, her mind made up on a risky gambit. She whispers a final plan into Penny's ear, knowing they can't let the charm fall into the wrong hands. The two share a heavy, meaningful look as the reality of the situation sinks in. Penny looks up in confusion as Cher begins to pull away from her. Cher asks for forgiveness, telling her friend not to hate her for what she's about to do. Standing tall, Cher moves away from Penny to face their hunter alone. Lu impatiently asks if they are finally done with their final goodbyes. Cher confronts her, mentioning that Lu already saw the charm earlier and should know its value. Lu focuses her gaze on the item, her greed overriding her caution. Cher remembers that Lu was so eager to take the charm before that she didn't even check it. Positioning herself right at the edge of the cliff, Cher prepares for a leap of faith. Penny tries to move but is overcome by a sudden throb of intense pain. She watches in horror as Cher makes her move toward the rushing water. Lu realizes the plan and dashes forward to stop Cher from jumping. She manages to grab onto Cher, but her momentum carries them both over the ledge. Their feet leave the solid ground as they plummet toward the river below. Cher stares back at her enemy with a calm, resolute expression during the fall. Penny is left alone at the top, watching helplessly as Cher disappears into the mist. As she falls, Cher clutches the charm tightly against her chest. A memory of Penny's warm smile flashes through her mind one last time. She offers a silent prayer that their promise to leave together isn't broken here. The two figures disappear under the surface with a massive splash of white water. The waterfall roars with terrifying intensity as the current sweeps everything toward the edge. Lu desperately clings to the overhanging branches, narrowly avoiding the long plunge. Below, the water crashes against the jagged rocks where Cher has disappeared from sight. Lu stares down at the churning river, certain that the fall was fatal for the princess. Penny struggles to her feet, gasping for air as her injuries take a heavy toll. A dark silhouette approaches her through the hazy, sun-drenched forest. Lu stands over the wounded protector, looking down with cold indifference. She watches Penny with a sharp, calculating gaze, showing no sign of mercy. A small keepsake around Penny's neck catches the light, sparkling amidst the chaos. Despite her weakness, Penny glares back at her captor with pure defiance. Lu roughly grabs her by the shoulder, forcing her to move despite her wounds. Penny's world begins to spin as she realizes she is being taken back to the palace as a prisoner. A sudden vision of a woman standing in a peaceful field flashes through the mind. In a memory of better days, a younger Penny smiles while holding a simple flower. She shares a quiet, gentle moment of connection with her companion. The two sit together under a grand marble structure, far removed from the current nightmare. Back in reality, Cher's legs are seen washing up on a cold, muddy riverbank. She lies face down in the dirt, struggling to regain consciousness after the brutal fall. With a ragged cuff, she drags herself out of the shallow water and onto dry land. Cher looks at her trembling hands, stunned to realize she actually survived. The freezing air bites at her skin as she sits shivering on the shore. A sudden gust of wind howls through the dark canopy of the forest above. Cher peers into the shadows, her thoughts immediately turning to Penny's safety. Her legs nearly give out as she attempts to stand and move forward through the brush. She treks across the treacherous, rocky terrain bordering the cliffside. Small birds begin to chirp in the trees as the first signs of dawn appear. Cher steps cautiously through the blue-tinted woods, trying to stay as quiet as possible. She recognizes the nearby lake, realizing she has made it back to a familiar area of the woods. A sudden rustle in the bushes causes her to flinch and hide behind a large rock. Two men walk through the clearing, discussing their path and avoiding the main army. Cher watches from the shadows as they mention the queen's upcoming coronation. When they mention a missing artifact, Cher's hand immediately goes to her chest in alarm. She pulls out the hidden keepsake to inspect it closely for the first time. Fumbling with the object, she notices the intricate blue jewel set within the metal. Cher recalls the moment Penny placed the charm around her neck during their escape. A wave of shock hits her as she realizes Penny gave her the real artifact to protect her. The sound of her gasp alerts the men, who stop and look toward her hiding spot. Cher slides away silently, keeping the rock between her and the approaching scouts. She lifts her head with a look of absolute determination. Spotting a pair of horses tied nearby, she sees a chance to close the distance to the palace. After setting a small fire as a diversion, she prepares to take one of the mounts. She leaves a small token on the supplies as a form of payment for the horse she is borrowing. Cher mounts the animal, ready to ride back into the heart of the conflict. She ties her hair back, focusing her mind on the dangerous mission ahead. Looking back at the path she traveled, she vows to face her past without fear or regret. Her expression hardens into one of a true leader ready for battle. With a sharp snap of the reins, she sets the horse into a fast gallop. Cher rides through the dark forest at full speed, heading straight for the palace towers. The scene shifts to the cold, imposing spires of the royal residence. A lone guard stands watch in a dimly lit, silent corridor. Queen Nyla walks past a bowing servant, her presence radiating icy authority. A heavy door clicks shut as she enters the private chambers. Nyla moves through the room with a calculated, steady pace. Inside, Penny lies unconscious and heavily bandaged while a fake charm sits discarded on the table. A hand clacks a small keepsake onto the wooden table as Nyla reflects on finally getting what she wanted. Lou stands by while the unconscious Penny rests on a nearby bed, noting that the goal of taking the throne is nearly achieved. Lau looks toward Nyla, who acknowledges that congratulations are in order for reaching this milestone. Nyla stands tall, reminding Lu of the real reason she sought power in the first place. Her true intention is to take the throne only to watch the entire kingdom crumble into ruins. Nyla's gaze hardens as she questions why people go mad for control over such a small country. She clenches her fist, determined to end everything on her own terms with pride. Suddenly, Nyla wobbles and leans against the table, her physical strength momentarily failing her. Lu quickly moves to support her as she stumbles under the weight of her own resolve. Lu looks down with a grim expression, providing support to the struggling queen. Lu stares ahead into the room, silent as the weight of their mission hangs in the air. On the bed, Penny remains out cold, her breathing heavy and labored. Nyla stays hunched over the furniture, lost in a momentary lapse of strength. She eventually stands back up, looking off to the side as she refocuses on her path. A vision of the late Prince Bel appears, showing his gentle smile and kind eyes. Nyla admits that knowing him so well only makes her current situation more painful. She looks out the window at the night sky, unable to stop thinking about the past. Looking back at the unconscious Penny, Nyla wonders what would have happened if she hadn't returned. The two women stand together in the quiet room, surrounded by the shadows of their choices. Nyla turns her head with a sharp, knowing look, claiming that everything was destined to be this way. Lu listens intently, watching the queen's every move as she speaks of fate. Nyla raises a sparkling charm into the light, a symbol of the power she now holds. Lu immediately drops to one knee, offering her full respect and loyalty. Lu's face is filled with a dark realization, as she understands that Nyla plans to see this through to the very end. Lu remains in her kneeling position, waiting for further instructions. Nyla turns her back, preparing to dismiss her most trusted ally. She reaches out a hand toward Lu, acknowledging the bond they share. Lu looks up, sensing the finality in the air. Nyla's hand pauses for a brief second of Lu's head. She gives Lu a firm pat on the head, thanking her for the loyalty she has shown. Nyla offers a small, rare smile while expressing that she couldn't have made it this far alone. Her hand drops away as she prepares to give a final command. Nyla instructs Lu to leave the kingdom immediately before the Margrave's army arrives. Lu begins to walk away, following the order to save herself. She keeps her head down while stepping through the room, processing the queen's last order. Lu exits the chambers, leaving Nyla to face the coming storm by herself. Nyla stands alone, looking toward the door she just closed on her past. The room remains empty and still, signifying the end of their partnership. Outside, Lu stands in the bright light, considering the weight of Nyla's words. A door is suddenly flung open as the urgency of the situation sets in. Lu dashes through the palace corridors, rushing to complete whatever task remains. She looks out from a high balcony, surveying the palace grounds below. Lu grips the stone railing tightly, her mind racing with the realization of Nyla's true plan. She stares out into the distance, her expression full of concern for the future. Lu turns on her heel, deciding to change her course of action. The scene shifts to the exterior of the palace as night falls over the silent structures. The town square is shown completely deserted, with no signs of life in the marketplace. The streets are eerily quiet, making it clear that the citizens have already fled or hidden. Cher arrives on the scene, pulling her hood back as she notes the lack of people. She leads her horse through the empty plaza, breathing heavily from the long journey. Cher gives her horse a gentle pat, thanking the animal for its hard work. She looks ahead with tired but determined eyes, focused on her next destination. Cher arrives at the guild office, noticing that the building appears abandoned and boarded up. Suddenly, a door is flung open, and a man steps out to see who is there. Cher is startled by the sudden movement and looks toward the newcomer. A bald man with a mustache grabs Cher's hand, excitedly telling her it's perfect timing. He leads her toward the entrance, mentioning that he was just wondering what to do with Penny's things. The man smiles broadly, relieved to see that Cher is still alive and kicking. Cher follows him inside, looking weary but ready to reclaim what was lost. The guild ally presents Cher with her belongings. Cher examines a small item, realizing its significance. It's a keepsake she once gave away, now returned to her hands. She speaks with the innkeeper, who listens intently to her concerns. Cher expresses her gratitude for the recovery of the item. She clenches her hands, wishing she could have returned the charm to its owner personally. The innkeeper looks surprised when Cher brings up a new request. She asks if there is a secret way to infiltrate the palace and offers payment for the information. Her determination is clear as she pushes for an answer. A nearby candle flickers while the room remains quiet during the negotiation. The innkeeper takes a moment to think over the dangerous request. He reveals a secret passage was once mentioned to him by a certain associate. A memory shows him waving off a rider who provided the tip. Cher smiles, knowing exactly who gave him that information. The man suddenly stands up, ready to move. They arrive at a local residence to make their final stop for the day. The innkeeper chats jovially with a local woman as Cher follows. Cher walks through the quiet streets, observing the empty town. The deserted pathways reflect the growing anxiety of the impending attack. The innkeeper explains that he maintains his role to help protect the community. He claims that being an information broker is actually quite enjoyable for him. The woman laughs and nudges him, appreciating his efforts. Cher looks on, feeling a sense of responsibility as the nation's princess. Peaceful greenery stands in stark contrast to the internal turmoil of the kingdom. The empty city squares highlight how much things have changed. Cher's footsteps echo as she makes her way toward her destination. She walks with a heavy heart, contemplating the weight of her lineage. The massive palace looms in the distance beyond the trees. She pushes through the undergrowth, staying hidden from view. Cher reflects on the harsh labels her family has endured over the years. The innkeeper glances back, keeping a watchful eye on her. They navigate a garden path while discussing the fleeing nobility. The man pats her shoulder, encouraging her to stay focused on her loved ones. He gives her a gentle push forward, signaling it's time to act. Cher pauses in surprise, realizing he likely knows her true identity. She crouches low in the grass, steeling her resolve for the rescue mission ahead. Elsewhere, a wooden door is pushed open as someone enters a room. A bandaged Penny sits alone, waiting in the dim light. A dark-haired visitor enters and stands before her. The two sit across from each other in a tense standoff. Penny stares coldly at the person who has come to see her. The visitor looks down, appearing conflicted about the situation. They mention a desire to see the queen survive the coming conflict. The room remains quiet as the visitor processes their thoughts. Penny's hands twitch with restrained emotion as she listens. The visitor reaches out toward her as if to make a point. Penny's gaze sharpens, anticipating the next move. Suddenly, Penny lunges forward and initiates a physical confrontation. The visitor struggles against the hold, gripping Penny's bandaged arm. Penny grimaces as the exertion takes a toll on her injured body. A chair is knocked over during the brief scuffle. The furniture crashes against the wall as they tumble to the floor. Penny manages to pin the visitor down, ending the struggle. The visitor remains remarkably calm, pointing out that Penny's attempt was unsuccessful. Penny demands that they stop speaking in riddles. The visitor looks away, refusing to meet her eyes for a moment. Finally, the visitor declares that the real reason for the visit is to set Penny free. Penny stares in shock, asking for clarification on what was just said. Lou looks down solemnly, explaining that she is choosing to release Penny of her own accord. Penny remains on the floor, skeptical that the queen would ever order her freedom. Lou confirms that this is her personal decision, not an order from the throne. She stands firm, stating she was told to live however she chooses from now on. This revelation leaves Penny rubbing her neck in pure disbelief. Lou maintains a stoic and serious expression despite the weight of her choice. She gazes out the window, looking like someone who has finally made up their mind. Meanwhile, a figure in a green cloak navigates through the palace courtyards with purpose. Lou sits with her hands clasped, informing Penny that the princess has already returned to the palace. Penny's eyes widen in alarm as she realizes Cher is putting herself in danger. She immediately springs to her feet, ready to take action. Lu turns her back, mentioning the queen's instruction to flee before the army arrives. She walks through the room, grimly noting that a funeral might take place instead of a coronation. Finally, Lu reaches for the door handle to grant Penny her exit. Lu looks back one last time, her expression unreadable. Penny, her arm still heavily bandaged, stares at her captor-turned ally in confusion. When Penny asks why Lu won't intervene, Lu admits she cannot defy the queen's ultimate wishes. Lu turns to leave, signaling that their conversation is over. She clenches her jaw, clearly struggling with the internal conflict of her loyalty. Penny follows her steps, pointing out how unusually talkative and out of character Lu is being. Penny confronts her directly, asking if she's simply afraid of being rejected by the queen. Lu looks down, unable to provide a comforting answer. Penny paces the room, trying to figure out her own next move in this mess. Penny touches her hair, deep in thought about the princess's safety. The empty bed sits as a reminder of Penny's previous state of captivity. The two share a tense, silent moment as the reality of the situation sinks in. Lu looks away, insisting that she has no hidden motives for this release. Penny is confused when Lu mentions reaching a crossroads in her life. Regardless of the mystery, Penny declares she is going to find Cher right now. Penny stands by the door, deducing that Cher has gone to save the queen herself. Lu sits hunched over, promising that while the queen may be lost, she will ensure Cher is saved. A hand grips the door handle tightly, ready to end the standoff. Penny pulls the heavy door open, preparing to make her escape. Lu looks up as Penny calls out to her one last time. Penny pauses to ask where Lu intends to go after this. Lu stares blankly ahead, answering that her destination is the foggy forest. Penny stands in the doorway, surprised by Lu's choice of retreat. She takes one final look at the woman who freed her before stepping out. Penny leaves the room behind, heading into the palace corridors. The door creaks as it begins to close on the pass. Lu remains inside, bowing her head in a moment of quiet despair. The room stands empty, with the door left wide open to the hallway. Deep inside the palace, a luxurious room sits in the afternoon sun. Ornate furniture and a grand piano decorate the silent space. Cher, still wearing her dark traveling cloak, enters the room through a hidden passage. She steps cautiously into the light, searching for any signs of life. Outside, a decorative gazebo sits nestled within the lush palace gardens. Cher leans against a stone pillar, gasping for air after a frantic run. She looks around the garden, her eyes filled with desperation and exhaustion. Pushing through the foliage, she continues her search for the queen. Cher pauses for a moment, scanning the area for any movement. She reaches a set of grand double doors and flings them open with all her might. Cher stands in the entrance, breathless as she finally finds what she was looking for. She spots Queen Nyla standing silently by the window, looking out at the kingdom. Cher looks at her aunt with a pained expression, overwhelmed by the reunion. Nyla remains still, her back turned to the room as she watches the horizon. Cher slowly approaches the queen, calling out to her softly. Nyla's hands tremble as she grips the stone railing of the balcony. Finally, Nyla turns with a hollow look, asking Cher where there is left for her to go. Cher stands in the room, her expression filled with hesitation as she considers her next move. She clenches her hand tightly over her chest, trying to muster the courage to speak. Cher confronts Queen Nyla on the palace balcony, insisting that the queen isn't to blame for everything. Nyla gazes out into the distance, appearing distant and resigned to her fate. Cher pleads with her aunt to stop this cycle of resentment and pain. The empty halls of the palace reflect the growing tension between the two women. Nyla turns her back, questioning why they should continue hurting one another. Cher looks down, realizing that her words might not be reaching the queen. She remains rooted to the spot, unsure of how to bridge the emotional gap. Nyla stands solitary at the railing, a figure of isolation against the bright sky. A memory of Cher waiting for a dark end flashes through her mind. Penny appears in a flashback, smiling brightly as a reminder of the future Cher wants to protect. Cher takes a decisive step forward, determined to save her loved ones. Sunlight streams through the high windows, illuminating the path toward the balcony. Cher approaches Nyla once more, stating her intent to save both the queen and Penny. Nyla's hand rests heavily on the cold stone of the railing. Cher begs her aunt to keep living, even if it seems like a selfish request. Nyla questions what her life would be worth if she were to step down from the throne. Cher is taken aback by the depth of Nyla's despair and emptiness. She looks down in silence, realizing she may have underestimated the queen's inner turmoil. Nyla wipes her face, looking exhausted by the weight of her crown. The queen stands still as the wind blows past, her resolve seemingly fading. Nyla looks at Cher with a cold, hollow gaze, rejecting the idea of moving on. Cher hesitates, her face showing the pain of seeing her aunt in such a state. A close-up reveals the lack of light in Nyla's eyes as she declares it's too late. Nyla grips the railing with white-knuckled intensity, driven by her past. The massive, empty throne room stands as a symbol of the power Nyla once sought. In a vision of her past, Nyla sits slumped on the throne, overwhelmed by the pointlessness of her revenge. Shadows of her former anger and the memory of Belle haunt the queen's reflection. The opulent dining hall sits vacant, highlighting the loneliness of royal life. Cher recalls a happier time walking through a garden with Penny. Cher's face is bright with a smile as she remembers that momentary peace. Back in the present, Nyla leans dangerously over the balcony edge. Cher closes the distance between them, Desperate to pull Nyla back from the brink, she watches the queen closely, sensing the finality in her aunt's voice. A sudden sound startles Cher as the situation takes a sharp turn. Cher's eye widens in shock as she sees Nyla making a final move. Nyla holds up a golden charm, signaling the end of her journey. Cher lunges forward, shouting for her aunt to stop. She manages to grab onto Nyla, but the queen is determined to let go. Cher clings to her, pleading with her not to do this. Nyla looks at Cher with a strangely calm expression, asking for pity. Tears stream down Cher's face as she realizes she cannot heal her aunt's wounds. The architectural details of the palace frame the tragic scene unfolding on the balcony. Nyla pulls Cher into a final, heartbreaking embrace, seeking understanding. Suddenly, Nyla pushes Cher away with all her strength. Cher watches in absolute horror as Nyla falls backward into the open air. Cher rushes to the railing, her hands reaching out into nothingness. Nyla's figure grows smaller as she plummets toward the ground. Desperate, Cher leans over the edge, unwilling to let it end this way. Both women are seen falling through the vast, bright sky. Cher falls through the dark void, her thoughts filled with regret. Suddenly, a hand reaches out and firmly grabs Cher's wrist. Cher looks up, stunned to find that someone has caught her in mid-air. Penny bursts into the room, calling out for Nyla with a look of pure concern. A cloaked figure leaps from the balcony, disappearing into the bright sky. Someone lands heavily on the forest floor, bracing themselves against the ground to break the fall. The view from the ground shows the swaying trees as someone struggles to catch their breath. Cher looks down in confusion, wondering exactly what just happened. Penny ends up on top of Cher after their shared fall, both looking stunned by the impact. Penny quickly asks if Cher is hurt while they both lie in the grass recovering. Cher looks away with a hesitant expression, clearly shaken by the recent events. Cher murmurs a soft response, her gaze fixed downward as she processes the situation. Penny laughs with genuine relief, happy that she managed to catch Cher this time around. They sit up together in the meadow, Penny offering support as they catch their breath. Penny gently touches Cher's face to check for any injuries, her concern evident in her eyes. Penny looks directly at Cher, her gaze full of unspoken emotion. Cher clutches a keepsake charm, the metal clinking softly as she holds it tight. Penny smiles warmly at Cher, finally sharing a moment of peace between them. Cher looks down, her long hair obscuring part of her face as she reflects. Nyla lies perfectly still on the grass while the others watch over her. The wind ruffles Nyla's hair as she remains motionless on the ground. Cher kneels in the grass, reflecting on the choices that led them to this tragic point. Nyla's body rests in the sunlit meadow, marking the end of her long and painful struggle. A butterfly flutters over a patch of wild daisies, signaling a shift in the atmosphere. Penny reaches out and places her hand over Cher's in a silent show of support. The two stand together among the trees, silhouetted by the bright afternoon sun. Nyla stares upward with a weary expression, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of inner turmoil. A hand reaches into the grass and clenches the blades tightly as emotions run high. Cher pauses to look back at Nyla one last time before finally moving forward. Nyla lies on the ground, wondering aloud if finding happiness is even possible for her now. Cher and Penny begin walking away together toward the distant palace buildings. Suddenly, Penny rushes back and pulls Cher into a tight, emotional embrace. Cher holds onto Penny's arms, worried that this moment might be their final memory together. Cher's face is filled with sorrow as she speaks to her companion. The two stay huddled together in the field, surrounded by tall grass and wildflowers. A close-up of Nyla shows her eyes fixed on the sky, lost in deep thought and regret. Cher looks down at her aunt, asking to hear the final words of the person they lost. Tears stream down Cher's face as she recalls the message to live freely. The scene transitions to a bright, open sky filled with soft white clouds. Cher and Penny stand in a stone courtyard, noticing a lone figure standing nearby. Footsteps echo on the stone as someone walks away from the pair. Cher turns her head to watch the departing figure with a serious and focused gaze. A dark-haired woman stands in the distance, her back turned to the camera. The woman looks back over her shoulder with a calm, neutral expression. A hand holds up a golden keepsake charm as it sparkles brightly in the sunlight. The woman walks through the palace arches, leaving the past behind her for good. Cher and Penny embrace in a soft, white light, choosing to find happiness together. The pair stands on a stone bridge, looking out at the world beyond the palace walls. Penny holds a small, shining object between her fingers. Penny shows the item to Cher, suggesting it's finally time to let go of their burdens. They walk away across the cobblestones, heading toward a brand new destination. The palace looms in the background as they vow to live their own lives from now on. Cher smiles with pure joy, her hair flowing as they embrace their new freedom. Penny looks back with a look of contentment, ready for whatever the future holds. Their boots step in unison as they move together toward the horizon. The two share a final, happy embrace in a field of flowers as their journey reaches its conclusion. The sun filters through the lush trees as the duo finally makes their way out of the palace grounds for good. Penny and Cher stand in the courtyard, suddenly realizing they've left almost all their funds behind in their haste. Penny looks visibly stressed by the oversight, feeling the weight of their new financial reality. Looking up at a weather vane, she vows that they will return one day to settle their debts and return any favors. With a bit of help from local friends, the pair finally rides out of town on horseback to start their journey. 1 year later, Cher sits on the deck of a ship, looking much more relaxed as she dives into a book. She glances up from her reading, taking in the peaceful atmosphere of the open sea. Penny approaches her on the stairs, offering a helping hand during their travels. Cher pulls out a letter from Lu, her expression turning serious as she prepares to read the news. Startled by the sudden movement, Penny springs up while Cher remains focused on the correspondence. Penny holds her head in frustration, begging Cher not to use formal titles with her anymore. Cher firmly snaps her book shut, signaling that the conversation is far from over. She gives Penny a sharp look, questioning why she is so hesitant about the current situation. Penny stands frozen as Cher rises to face her, the tension between them momentarily peaking. Cher looks down thoughtfully, her mind clearly racing with the implications of Lu's letter. Penny waves her hands dismissively, trying to lighten the mood as she steps back. A sealed letter sits abandoned on the floor, its contents having already caused quite a stir. Penny ends up sprawled on the ground, overwhelmed by the idea of returning for a festival. She leans back and sighs, trying to recall the complex political updates Lu sent in her long essay. She remembers the innkeeper also sent word about a massive celebration to mark the queen's coronation. Penny rubs her nose, suspecting that this invitation might lead to more trouble than they expect. Flashback to a few days ago, the story shifts to the quiet town where they had been staying. Penny gathers some clothes while mentioning that a letter has arrived for them outside. She sits on the edge of the bed, suggesting that Cher should be the one to read it. Cher leans in to look over Penny's shoulder, so they can examine the message together. They begin to open the letter, curious about what their old friend has to say. The letter details an invitation to the kingdom, showing an interior filled with maps and globes. Penny looks surprised that the innkeeper is so insistent on their return for the anniversary. Cher smiles and asks if they should consider going, but Penny seems completely reluctant. Cher keeps an encouraging expression, trying to sell the idea of the trip. Penny turns away, worried about the large crowds and the attention they might draw. A view of the busy porch shows that the means for their return is right in front of them. Penny tosses herself back onto the bed, declaring she has no desire to go anywhere. She settles in comfortably, suggesting they just stay put and get some more rest. Penny looks up at Cher, double-checking to see if they are truly staying behind. Cher sits beside her and asks if there's any part of her that still has lingering regrets. Cher gazes off to the side with a solemn look before making a sudden, firm decision. She steps out of bed, catching Penny completely off guard with her sudden change of heart. Penny panics as Cher tells her to stay behind and realizes her clothes have already been packed. Down at the docks, a massive ship sits ready to set sail across the ocean. Penny rushes toward the pier, shocked to find that Cher had prepared for this departure well in advance. Penny catches up, looking completely flustered as she questions Cher's sudden rush. The two stand on the wooden pier, finally ready to face their past. Cher turns toward the ship with a smirk, just as a crew member runs toward them. The worker mistakenly addresses Cher with high status, confusing her for someone else. He quickly snatches up the luggage, eager to help the supposed noblewoman. Penny can't help but giggle as the confused worker zooms away with their bags. She laughs hysterically at the fact that Cher was just mistaken for her. Cher stands her ground, asking Penny what she was originally trying to say before the interruption. Penny decides to drop it, letting her thoughts drift away with the sea breeze. The ship's anchor rattles against the hull as Cher suggests they finally head inside. Cher walks up the ramp, teasing Penny one last time by using a formal address. Back in the present, Penny sits up on the deck and takes a deep breath. She looks at the stack of books nearby, including the one she had been reading earlier. Penny goes back to Lu's letter, which mentions the festival and the Queen's latest exploits. She reads further into the postscript, her eyes widening as she reaches the end. A memory of Lu shows her holding a small box, revealing she has been keeping something valuable safe. The letter points to a secret location near the palace wall where the items are hidden. Penny's hand trembles with excitement as she realizes what they've been missing this whole time. She shouts out in a frenzy, startling Cher with her sudden burst of energy. Cher looks on in confusion as Penny demands the captain push the ship to full speed toward the kingdom. It has been 2 days since the pair returned to the kingdom, and the bustling town square remains filled with locals and travelers alike. The local tavern stands as a central hub for news and rest during the ongoing festivities. Inside, the patrons observe a woman sitting quietly at the bar, noting how much she has changed over the past year. Penny looks surprised as an acquaintance comments on her new appearance and attire. She attempts to blend in further by asking the tavern worker for a set of spare clothes. The worker playfully lectures her, reminding Penny of the hospitality she received in the past without ever sending word back. Penny freezes mid-bite, feeling the weight of her long absence. Overwhelmed by the social pressure, she slumps over the counter while the staff continues their busy routine. She looks away, clearly nervous about navigating her old home after so much time away. Meanwhile, an older man presents a small, red keepsake box to a woman with reddish hair, discussing its craftsmanship. Outside, the town is fully decorated with banners and flags for the festival season. Penny and Cher stand together in the middle of a crowded street, taking in the sights of the kingdom. Cher turns away with a frustrated expression, seemingly bothered by a recent exchange. Her mood shifts to genuine distress as she realizes her playful attitude might have caused a misunderstanding. Penny continues walking into the crowd, leaving Cher to reflect on her actions. Standing alone, Cher holds the red keepsake box tightly, debating how to proceed. A memory surfaces of a younger Penny resting her head on a table, admiring the value of a gold charm. In the flashback, Cher watches Penny with a soft expression as they discuss their future plans. Back in the present, Cher walks through a quiet alleyway, wondering if making this journey together was the right choice. The palace towers loom over the city, a constant reminder of the life they left behind. A gentle breeze rustles the trees as the evening sun begins to set over the horizon. Cher maintains a determined gaze, focusing her efforts on finding where Penny has gone. She finds herself in a deserted part of town, with only a stray leaf dancing across the cobblestones. In another part of the festival grounds, Penny stands near the decorations, looking back with a sense of confusion. She wanders through the marketplace, feeling out of place among the happy crowds. Cher takes a moment to rest on a park bench, sighing as she realizes she has overcomplicated the situation. She leans back, contemplating whether she should just return to their lodgings. Suddenly, a rustling sound near the palace wall catches her attention. She spots Penny crouched in the grass near the stone fortifications, looking startled to be discovered. Penny shouts out in surprise as she sees Cher approaching from a high vantage point. Cher lands safely on the soft grass, ending her search at last. Penny catches her and spins her around, ensuring she doesn't lose her balance. Penny huffs with relief, noting that the sudden reunion was quite a shock. While standing in the tall grass, Penny questions Cher about her whereabouts during the day. Cher looks at her companion with a serious expression, ready to reveal her true intentions. She pulls out the tattered red box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. Cher admits that this wasn't the ideal way to present the gift, but she couldn't wait any longer. She carefully slides the ring onto Penny's finger, marking a new chapter in their journey. The two share a quiet moment of connection as they finalize the gesture. Penny then reveals a small wooden chest she found, explaining that Lou's letter led her straight to it. They stand together by the wall, laughing at the chaotic events of the evening. The pair falls back into the grass, finally letting go of the day's tension. Cher smiles warmly and thanks Penny for her constant support and loyalty. Penny sits up and asks about their departure, curious about how much longer they will stay. Looking out over the festive lights of the city, Cher explains that they will leave once the festival concludes tomorrow. Penny leans against Cher's shoulder, listening as Cher expresses her relief that the kingdom is finally at peace. Cher reassures her that she is truly okay now and ready to move forward. They look up at the starry night sky, watching a shooting star pass over the kingdom. A brief memory of a woman in formal attire passes through Cher's mind. The image of a regal, white-haired woman stands as a final vestige of the past life they have outgrown. Below the palace, the courtyard remains full of life as the celebration continues late into the night. Penny looks down at her hand, admiring the ring that symbolizes their bond. The two share a close, peaceful moment against a floral backdrop, content with their decision to leave. Penny playfully blocks the path, suggesting they head back home to continue their life together.